right. Good morning. For those of you who can hear me out in the lobby, we are going to get started. I just have to have John Taylor stop walking around and saying hello to everybody that he knows. Good morning, everybody. My name is Scott Sternberg, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Boulder Economic Council. And it's just such a pleasure to see all of you here in person. So thank you so much for coming and spending your morning with us. We have an exciting series of events. It is a multimedia extravaganza, so I'm a little bit nervous that everything will be pulled off, but thanks to the UCAR AV team, they've assured me that that we'll make it through this morning session, so it's going to be exciting. So again, welcome everybody. I wanted to just make a couple of comments here before we start the program. This year we chose the theme of our evolving economy. Certainly when we last convened in mass, in person, our economy was, let's call it, relatively stable and growing. And we had a bit of a pandemic. We have some economic stressors that we're currently dealing with, and unfortunately conflicts arising around the world, evolving. But we also want to address some of the long-term trends that we certainly have seen changes in the hospitality sector. We're going to be talking to a local business owner to give a perspective on that. The explosion of biosciences was not necessarily induced by the pandemic, but if you're not a specialist in RNA, I guarantee you after today you'll be a specialist in RNA and mRNA in particular. And then, of course, everything ranging from advanced manufacturing to the rise of artificial intelligence and machine learning, the stressors of the hybrid work environment, all of this is what we're going to address today. So I would say exciting conversation that we're going to have today. So thank you all for being here. I'd like to start off by just saying that as part of our sustainability program, our program is electronic. So this is a QR code. You can find these codes around the area if you want to scan that in and get the bios and of all of the speakers that are playing today, and as well as all of the sponsors and the support efforts that we have here at the Chamber. So please log on to that. And I'm always skeptical of having everyone pull out their phones and look at it immediately as I'm talking, but nonetheless, I don't do that at the dinner table with my children, so hopefully. But nonetheless, thank you for coming, and certainly make an effort to say hello to the speakers and the sponsors that are with us today. So with that, I'd like to recognize our sponsors. Our co-presenting sponsors today, and those sponsors that have been with us for many years, CU, Boulder, and Elevations Credit Union. We're just so thankful for their continued support throughout the years to make this event and other events here at the Chamber possible. So thank you, CU, Boulder, and Elevations Credit Union. And I know we have a number of CU employees over here. I'm pointing to this table over here. They tend to bunch up. But say hello and to those folks. And we'll hear from Dennis Paul from Elevations Credit Union here in a minute. I'd like to recognize our economic vitality partner, the W.W. Reynolds Group. I'd like to recognize our community sponsor, the City of Boulder. And specifically, I'd like to call out our city manager who is with us today, Nuria. Thank you so much for all the work you do here in the city. And if I could have everyone that is a city employee, I think we have a number of them in the office today, stand up and be recognized, because we really appreciate your support. As you can imagine, economic vitality in the Boulder Economic Council doesn't exist with the support of the city staff, so we appreciate that work. Our supporting sponsors this year are Ball Aerospace, Berg Hill, Greenleaf, and Rashidi, Celestial Seasonings, Google, KBI Biopharma, Plant Moran, UCAR, which is the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research, and we'll hear a little bit more about that, and Excel Energy. So thank you so much for your continued support. We are also thankful to have a media organization, or two media organizations that are constantly with us along the way. So thank you so much to both BizWest and the Daily Camera for your support and your accurate representation of all the proceedings here today. And lastly, I'd like to mention BOK Financial, and Eide Bailey as our contributing sponsors. So if you could, just give a round of applause to all of the folks that made today possible. I've just been handed a note of something that I can't read. But I believe this is, we want to recognize, if for some of you, if you haven't noticed this already, it's an election season, as evidenced by a lot of the signs that are going up in a lot of the yards around the city. But we are thankful to have a number of elected officials here today, or those that are running for office. So if I can read John's handwriting, I will highlight the following people. So I know Bob Yates is here, so Bob, welcome. I believe Council Member Nicole Spear, are you here today? Welcome. And candidate for City Council this year, Tina Moo? State Representative, sorry. Yeah, thank you, so I apologize. And candidate Tashaya Adams. Your handwriting wasn't that bad. Thank you very much. So thank you all so much for being here, and yeah. So I want to introduce our host for today, and I actually go back a little ways with Tony, as we were trustees here nearly a decade ago here at this organization. And in 2006, Tony took on the role of aspiring to the president of UCAR. Just such an amazing contribution that he has made, up to this point. And I can only imagine the difficulties and the details associated with managing a government research facility in the height of the pandemic, and how you were able to not only keep the momentum, but keep the trajectory of the science going on through what was basically 3 tumultuous years. As a former trustee, I want to be one of the many that congratulates Tony and the UCAR team for an announcement that was made just last month. The National Science Foundation yet again awarded the cooperative agreement to run the National Center for Atmospheric Research to UCAR, and that's an achievement in itself. However, that award came with nearly a 50% increase in base funding that's now approaching $1 billion of operational funding over 5 years. So Tony, congratulate you, to you and the UCAR team, also to Director Joseph and the NCAR team. It is truly an amazing effort. And I think that the trajectory of sciences is in good hands here. I would also hope that some of that $1 billion trickles down into our local economy, which I think it might. But just also recognize that UCAR is one of the major employers here in Boulder. So we very much appreciate that, and congratulations on the award. And so with that, I'd like to introduce the President of the University of Corporation for Atmospheric Research, Dr. Antonio Busalacchi.
Thank you, Scott. I'm actually going to touch upon a number of those points this morning. And good morning and welcome to UCAR's Center Green campus. I'm also joined here today by Bonnie Meinke, our Director of External Engagement and Business Development at UCAR. So I thought what I'd do this morning is provide you with a quick overview of who we are, what we do, some of our history and our presence in the Boulder community. I'm now entering my 8th year as president of UCAR. I was the first president to come into this position in 43 years straight out of academia. Now, and I'll say a few words why that's important for us. Before coming here, I was at the University of Maryland for 16 years, and prior to that, I was at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center for 18 years. My affiliation with this organization goes back to the 1970s when I was a graduate student, and I did the computing for my thesis on the Serial 3 Cray 1 supercomputer at NCAR, which was the first non-classified Cray supercomputer at the time. So let's start with the obvious. What's the difference between UCAR and NCAR? NCAR is the National Center for Atmospheric Research. It is the National Science Foundation's oldest and largest FFRDC, federally funded research and development center. So much like JPL is NASA's FFRDC, managed by Caltech, or the DOE Weapons Lab, being managed by Battelle. We are that managing entity for the NSF. Where we're different is our governance model, where UCAR is governed by 126 member universities, of which CU is one of our members. That membership elects the Board of Trustees, as Scott alluded to, where we overlapped. I report to the Board of Trustees. Another unique aspect of our organization is parallel to NCAR. We have a group here known as our UCAR's Community Programs, or UCP, somewhere up there. And it's parallel and separate to NCAR, where UCP supports the university community and government agencies such as NOAA, NASA, the DoD, in areas such as the provision of Earth system science data, how to assimilate or merge those data into predictive models, a Center for Ocean Leadership, distance learning and training in meteorology, a satellite constellation known as Cosmic, to name a few. At the highest level, our vision is Earth system science for a better world, with a mission to lead world-class Earth system science through partnerships, innovation, and service. At our core is the performance of research on weather, water, climate, air quality, space weather, and training the next generation of researchers. That vision goes back to the first NCAR director and UCAR president, Walter Orr Roberts, who saw science being in support of society, and he also had a mission to solidify Boulder as a scientific city. Walter Orr Roberts advocated for creating a scientific hub here in Boulder, first bringing the High Altitude Observatory from Harvard University to CU in the 1940s, then advocating for his colleagues at the National Bureau of Standards, now known as NIST, to move to Boulder in the 1950s. Then one of his conditions for accepting the NCAR director position was that NCAR and UCAR would be established here in Boulder. He wanted to create a community that fostered scientific collaboration across agencies and fields of study. As part of the negotiations between UCAR and the city of Boulder regarding an exception to the Blue Line Amendment at Table Mesa, Walt Roberts promised to maintain the site as a publicly accessible nature preserve and tourist attraction. He also envisioned making exhibits and local art accessible to the public on the Mesa Lab. Boulder residents voted 3-1 to allow city water services to the Mesa Lab above the Blue Line. Roberts said of Boulder in 1962 in a statement of thanks for the use of the Mesa site, and I quote, "This unique combination, a site of great natural beauty, close to a thriving scientific community in a progressive city, even in 1962, provides a nearly perfect atmosphere for creative science. We intend, as our ultimate thanks to the people of Colorado, to do our best to produce scientific results whose excellence is commensurate with the beauty of the surroundings and the enterprise of the community in which they were produced," end quote. Since Roberts first began advocating for a scientific community here in Boulder, the presence of science and technology organizations has grown to include national labs, science, aerospace, technology companies, as represented by many of you here today. In terms of some of our numbers, in 1967, when UCAR employees moved into the Mesa Lab that was designed by I.M. Pei, our staff had grown to 400 in 1967. Today, UCAR currently employs more than 1,450 people, and that makes us one of the largest employers here in the city of Boulder. Our annual budget is over $250 million for all of UCAR, and specific to NCAR, Scott alluded to, we were just awarded our cooperative agreement of $938 million. In recent years, UCAR has hosted, on average, about 150 events per year, oftentimes in this facility, workshops, tutorials, conferences, colloquia, bringing an average of 9,000 people to UCAR campuses each year. And on average, we host about 1,000 more longer-term scientific and technical visitors at NCAR and UCAR for periods from 1 to 6 months. Our footprint extends from Cheyenne, Wyoming, where we have the NCAR Wyoming Supercomputing Center, to Broomfield, where we just built a new $24 million research aviation facility at the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. UCAR holds title to about 10 buildings, such as here at Center Green, across the road to Foothills campus, and NSF holds title to about 3 buildings, such as the Mesa Lab. Tech transfer is also an important part of who we are. As Scott well knows, UCAR continues to license the Dropson technology to Vaisala, who has its North American headquarters in Louisville. A Dropson is a major airborne observation platform for hurricane reconnaissance. So when NOAA deploys its hurricane hunters, its P3s, to fly into hurricanes, they drop these little torpedo things that have a parachute that profile through the heart of a severe storm, measuring temperature and humidity, and send those data back in real time to improve forecasts of hurricanes. That technology was invented here in our Earth Observing Laboratory. UCAR helped to establish Global Weather Corporation here in Colorado in order to make several of our weather technologies available to commercial weather providers. So many of the private weather companies you see on TV or on the back page of the USA Today, they're really communications or PR companies, and they repackage and forward weather prediction forecasts. At the heart of those forecasts, though, is the modeling and regridding technology that was developed here by our Research Applications Lab. And recently, Global Weather Corporation was acquired by one of the largest technology companies in the world. Lastly, on the non-commercial front, earlier this year, NCAR was awarded approximately another $100 million award from both NOAA and NSF for the implementation of a new airborne phased array radar known as APAR. This is the next generation in airborne radar reconnaissance to be mounted and flown on our C-130. APAR is going to enable observations of precipitation processes while standing off, while not having to fly into the heart of a severe storm. And so in our community, we talk a lot about research to operations, or R2O, but normally it's the predictive models that we develop and then sort of transition them to NOAA for operations. Well, APAR is a great story for R2O for observations because this APAR platform is being looked at by NOAA to outfit their new fleet of C-130s, the same platform that's going to replace their P3s. Also, in keeping things here in Boulder, our prime partner in the development of APAR is Ball Aerospace, who's going to be involved from finalizing design, building the radar system, and flight testing of the whole front-end radar components. Lastly, let me close by thanking all of you. As I alluded to at the outset, I spent the first 34 years of my career inside the DC Beltway. And yes, and when people complain about the traffic here in Boulder, you know, nothing compared to DC. And yes, you know, the Beltway area has its own high concentration of federal labs and Research One universities, but I could not be more impressed and appreciative of the high-tech ecosystem we have here in Boulder that has a direct line back to our founder, Walt Orr Roberts. So thanks very much.
Tony, thank you very much. We definitely got off to a great start. I appreciate that, and thank you so much for hosting us today. Of changing some things up and getting all of the juices flowing early in the morning here, we're going to pivot into a different conversation, one I think that you'll all recognize and appreciate. Before I do that, though, I want to first recognize those individuals that serve on the Boulder Economic Council Executive Committee. So if you all could stand up, I know I've seen Joe and Gretchen around here somewhere. So are you all in the room? There you are. Carl, thank you. Becky. They serve as our guiding light in our advisory committee to put together events such as this. And one of their comments was, you got to get it exciting, Scott. Get the summit exciting, okay? Apart from some of the other sage advice that they gave me. So in the spirit of that, we have a very special guest and a very special program that we would like to first introduce through the following video. If we could cue the first video, please.
The sink is one of those great staples of the Boulder scene.
The location of the sink is a place that sits right in the middle of the university, the Hill community, and in this city.
It's certainly one of the most famous college hangouts in America.
Even just driving by it or walking by it, it looks like a place you want to check out. Just casual, easy, really good food.
Everybody knew about the sink. That's where the night would get started.
It was always such a fun time, and the vibe there was just, people could let loose.
You walk in here and you can immediately feel that it's something special.
I think the art is a huge part of it because it just holds so much of Boulder's history in addition to the restaurant itself.
You tended to have conversations without a lot of eye contact because people were looking at the walls and the ceiling and going, oh, who's that?
Cuckoo.
So thank you. Our special guest today is Chris Heinritz, the co-owner of the Sink, and we're going to have a dialogue as to some of the challenges and experiences that the Sink has experienced as they celebrate their 100th year anniversary. So please join me in bringing up Chris Heinritz, co-owner of the Sink. We're also grateful to have one of our sponsors, the Daily Camera, provide John Valenkamp as a reporter and a journalist and 35 years in the industry. He's the senior editor for the Daily Camera, and he'll be coming up and having a conversation with Chris. So welcome John to the stage as well. John and Chris, I'll let you go at it.
You'll need to turn on your mics.
Let me turn the mic on. Oh, you can hear me now. Thank you, Scott. Good morning, everyone. Chris, it was good to meet you this morning. Yeah, and congratulations, 100 years of the Sink. If you could just kind of briefly tell us about that video. What is that?
Well, we're, coming into this year, we're celebrating our 100th anniversary, and we were trying to think of things that we can do for the celebration. And one of the things about the Sink is that there's an oral history for, but nothing that's really written down. There's been articles over the years, but we really wanted to take the time to put together a little video and encapsulate some of the key players throughout the year, and it turned into quite a project, and it's been really special.
Good. I noticed that video made specific mention of the location on the hill. Mm-hmm. Could you talk about that and the importance of that particular location?
Yeah, you know, it's the center of university life, right there on the corner of University Hill, and it's been a great location for us in that everything kind of walks right by us, and you know, the old adage of location is so true for us.
Very nice. So, a 100-year celebration would not be complete unless if we did not give some sort of a nod to how it all started.
As we understand the history, and from what we've been able to verify, two gentlemen bought the building here, which was the Sigma Nu Fraternity House, and opened a restaurant called Summer Sunken Gardens in 1923. A family named the Mays owned it at some point in the early 30s.
My grandma works here, and that was during her tenure at University of Colorado. There's a photo of her at that era. So it was named Sunken Gardens, but it was referred to as the Sink, where everybody that came here, I think from day one.
Okay, so just a quick show of hands. Okay. Not very many of you. I also didn't know it till I read our story about the 100th year anniversary. I really seriously thought it was like a kitchen sink type of thing, right?
Right.
So, you know, through the early decades of the Sink, there were a lot of changes that happened, you know, then into the 50s, and then the 60s and hippies and 70s and bikers and then into the 80s. Chris, what can you share with us about those decades at the sink?
Yeah, it's been a constant evolution throughout the years. Summer Sunken Gardens was European cuisine at the time, and we have an old menu from the 40s, which is a little bit later, but Salisbury steak and various things like that, and it's definitely evolved. And then it really kind of hit its heyday as it was one of the only 3-2 licensed bars that serve 3-2 beer in the city. So there weren't very many liquor licenses back then either. So college life really revolved around a handful of places, and the Sink was one of them. And being 3-2, it was an 18-year-old drinking age, so you had high school kids all the way up to people in their 30s hanging out in the same place. And it's just been a constant evolution of how it all has gone throughout the years, but it's always been the central hub of social life.
Got it. So, and thinking you alluded to this. So, in the late '80s, there was a significant change in federal law that led to an important pivot that had to be made at the Sink.
So, yeah, 1987, the federal drinking age changed to 21, and so to having a full bar at that time instead of the 3-2. 3-2 beer was you had to be 21 to drink 3-2 beer, so they said, well, let's just become a full bar at that point, and so it really changed the demographics of what was going on there. You no longer could 18 to 21-year-olds be in the Sink, and it eliminated some 60 to 70% of the college kids from going out and to a bar, and so it really changed how things were operating then. But we purchased the restaurant in 1992, and so shortly after they had changed over in 1989, and so yeah, it was demographics have been constantly evolving throughout the years for them.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the clip about that.
The changes that happened to the Sink were as a direct result of the change of the federal drinking laws. In 1987, the federal government said that all the states had to raise the drinking age to 21 or they would lose millions of dollars of federal highway funds. We decided that we had to close down our place. We were obsolete in terms of concept and selling 3-2 beer. There wasn't an age distinction between the products anymore.
And my brother said to me, he says, well, it'd be nice if we had a bar. And I go, well, we do have a bar. And he looked at me and we sort of looked at each other and we decided that why not put the Sink back? It was a 3-month project which culminated in my brother actively going out and getting the liquor license. But it was a major amount of work to turn it from a very primitive 3-2 beer bar into a modern full-service bar. Quite a bit of money, so it was a gamble for our family.
All right, I know that I remember that time actually specifically, and there were probably more than a few of you who remember the late 80s and the change in law, especially if you were like in that 18 to 21 age range at the time. I was fortunate, I turned 21 in 1987, which is about the time it changed. So Chris, if you could talk about the importance of what was referenced here in the video in terms of the meaning for the longevity of the Sink. What did that change do?
Yeah, it definitely forced us to try and compete on the bar scene level, and I guess the thing it did is it kind of made us just a bar, and we lost some of our uniqueness in our product, and the bar scene is very fickle. It's also kind of a race to the bottom in that whoever's got the cheapest drink that night is where all the kids are going to go. And we realized that the food was a more stable aspect of, and it had a broader demographic appeal. And so we started to pivot at that time to really improving our food quality and our food service, and that was a constant evolution till till this day today. And we kind of moved away from the bar scene at the time, 1992. Excuse me. We were 60% of our business happened after 10 p.m. and now today we close at 10 p.m. So.
I have to ask you, do you still serve Salisbury steak? I'm just wondering.
No,
okay,
no.
All right.
So yeah, it's been quite a change, and it's changed how we show up in the community as well, and it makes it easier to sleep at night, not wondering what's happening at the restaurant at 3 a.m.
So the next thing we want to talk about here now is that was around the time that was right before, actually, or about the time your family came out. So let's take a look at current management and ownership.
I graduated University of Wisconsin-Madison. I moved to Minneapolis for a year. The Midwest wasn't really agreeing with me, so I came out to Colorado to go for a walk in the woods. My brother James had moved out this way and was living in Boulder, and we were looking around for a business to get involved with.
Kirby, who owned the sink, was a business broker on the side. Our brother James was working with him. They were looking at various things like a laundromat and a 5 and Dime in Estes Park. And as Herbie got to know us, he out of the blue offered this place to us.
We'd reached a point in our life, we felt like we'd done a great thing for our family and for the university and for the town, really, to bring the sink back. My mom was sick at the time. That prompted us to say, well, maybe this is the right time for us to segue.
When Mark showed up and James and Chris, they were pilgrims. I mean, they didn't know what they were getting into at all.
So originally, there were 4 of us that bought the sink together. There's my brother James, my brother Chris, and our friend Cameron. I was 26. Yeah, we were young. We knew it had a lot of history. We appreciated the history. We knew we had a lot to work with here.
So I have to comment on the hair. I think I saw a mullet. Is that right?
Yeah, Mark sported one for sure.
All right, so I'm looking at that video. I see a lot of young faces. Mm-hmm. So what was it like? If you could kind of remind us how old you all were at the time, and what it was like for effectively kind of kids, right? I mean, not you. Most of you had only been old enough to drink for a few years, maybe.
Yeah.
What was at that age? What was it like to take on the responsibility of this establishment?
Yeah, I was young and naive, ambitious. We had no idea. We had no experience. We had never really even been to the sink. Hadn't gone to CU. We didn't have enough money. So the stressors of doing that, and just constantly living on the edge of having all the chips on the table, and it was years and years of doubling down and trying to just keep pushing forward and paying down debt and taking on new debt and paying that down, and it was quite a run for a number of years there.
So one thing that happened shortly after you bought the sink was that the music scene just took off in that area. There was Tulagis, the Fox. You had music, I think, 3 days a week or 3 nights a week, whatever that looked like. So what was that time like?
That's back. The Hill was definitely happening. The Fox Theater had just been open a couple of years. Tulagis had been open for a long time, and there was 3 or 4 places on the hill that had music. There was, 1,500 kids on the hill on a Friday night, and it was really the center of social life in Boulder. The Tulagi days go back to the 70s with Chuck Morris, who started at the Cech. He got us start promoting bands at the Cech, and then went on to Tulagi's, and now he owns and runs AEG Live. But so the music scene it was really happening since then, But at the time in the '90s, we had Big Head Todd and the Monsters. We had the Samples. Lots of local music happening, and that's all sort of dried up at this point now, unfortunately.
So I know, shortly after that as well, the Cech had to make another big pivot, and this one was involved, I think, hard hats and sledgehammers. So
In 1995, we took on a major renovation in the bar scene. Life was very hard on the physical building, and being a building built in 1895 in the basement of a house, which was never intended to have 200 kids going crazy at night, it definitely took a toll. And so we pivoted and decided to close for a month and a half and do a major renovation to really shore up the operations and stage it for the next era of growth that we were trying to do.
Well, we'll watch the video on that.
All right.
In 1995, we shut down for a month and redid the plumbing, put in 18 tap handles of beer lines instead of the 5 that we had.
It was really the forefront of the craft beer revolution, and try and be ahead of that one. We were the first fat tire account in Boulder.
We redid the bathrooms, we redid the furniture, we redid the lighting, we upgraded the kitchen at that time. And that was really a big moment for us to be able to push forward from.
So watching that video, it seems that you were all quite forward thinking, and that you seem to be catching this craft brew wave at the right time, even seem to be ahead of it, maybe even a little bit. What was going through your minds at that time?
At that time we had realized that you made a lot more money on draft beer than you did on bottled beer. So if we had 18 lines of draft beer, we could make a lot more money than selling bottles. So, at one point in the 70s, the Cech only sold bottles of Coors, and they were the largest 3-2 account of bottled beer in the United States. But I don't know if that's who we were up against at that time, if it was just Iowa or what. But the craft beer movement was something that was happening, and it was something that could fill out our 18 draft lines, and it was primarily in California and Oregon at the time, and but it was more interesting beer, and people were getting into it, and we saw the value in that.
Good. Looking at this video, a number of videos that we've seen, or clips we've seen so far, there's the background of everything you see there. There are the walls, the ceiling, and if walls could talk, those walls would. So talk to us about the artwork at the Cech.
Yeah, the artwork was an idea that was the owners in the 50s came up with, and they had a guy come in by the name of Mike Dormer, and he painted all the walls in a collegiate kind of theme, and his assistant at the time was Lloyd Cavich. Back in 1989, when they had they redid all the artwork, and Lloyd came back and he painted all of the artwork himself again. And so primarily Lloyd has done all of that artwork in 1989, and then after our remodel in 1995. And it's definitely unique. It's still college themed, but all of it came out of Lloyd's brain, and we had no input into however it was going to happen. So he unfortunately passed a few years ago, but he had a unique perspective on the world, and it's really a treat to have some of his wacky thoughts. So when you look at the walls, there's always something to entertain you.
Which is, I think, something that people come away from the Cech thinking about. So, over generations, there are people who've worked there, just hung out there, partied there, and as you mentioned, with the changes of the hours and menu, et cetera, it's kind of a place where multiple generations now can get together. Correct?
Yeah. We'd say our customer base is university affiliated. The college kids are definitely a core aspect of that, but they're by no means the majority of our customer base. And also with the tourism increasing in Boulder so much, we're a big stop for tourism. But the amount of people that come through there with stories of the Cech, how it's affected their lives, is it's really pretty special. The amount of people that met their wife there, that had their first business meeting there, that had the firsts of so many different things is really what makes it special for us.
So a little off script here, because we have a minute or two left, I'm sure, but the most famous person you've met at the Cech?
Well, that's Barack Obama. Okay. Came in 2012. There's quite a few people that are just under him in importance, but as leader of the free world.
More important than Robert Redford.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that was really a treat. He was coming to see you to speak, and much to the dismay of the people sitting in a sweltering Coors Event Center for an hour waiting for him to get his pizza at the Cech, we enjoyed his time, and it was really interesting to be inside that bubble of his life for a brief moment, and to interact with somebody that was that charismatic and that adept at work in the room.
Very nice. So I think we have one more clip to take a look at. Let's take a look.
I just love going back to the Cech now, and I can go back with my family, with my kids. It's a place that anybody comes in from out of town, we're going to go to the Cech.
I've been in town and I've seen 1,000 restaurants come and go, and yet the Cech thrives.
We need to hold on to our casual meeting places with good food and good drinks, and especially one that has as much history as the Cech does. Those places everywhere are disappearing, and including in Boulder too.
I hope that everyone still comes here and all the students still call this place a home.
I hope that it continues to grow and have, more history on its walls.
It's obviously special. Noticing how important it is to everybody, knowing that really gives you a drive to really want to take this business for many, many years to come.
The Cech's going to be around another 100 years. It's an amazing place.
All right, so the last quote there was from Chuck Morris saying the Cech's going to be around another 100 years. Who knows?
Yeah.
But certainly for the coming years, you are the person with the insight. So what opportunities and challenges now face the Cech?
Sure, yeah. You probably all have heard this, but probably our number one challenge is attracting labor, and that comes down to affordability of housing. And you know, I can't think of any of our full-time employees that actually live in Boulder, and including myself and my brother. Yeah, it's hard for us to attract management or full-time employees when they're driving from Thornton and passing thousands of restaurants on their way to the sink. But you know, and then the other thing is the minimum wage going up and up. Is it concerns me that we're going to price out our tourism in that we're, you know, every increase in minimum wage is a direct price increase on the menu. So those are big concerns at the moment. But you know, we've got a lot of wins behind us with our new two hotels, the hotel and the hotel conference center coming in the next year and a half, and it's going to really change how the Hill operates. There's going to be a lot more new faces up there. It's going to be really interesting to see. You know, when we bought the sink, you could still buy an Armani suit next door at Kinsley and Company, and now you can't buy anything besides food and I don't know, smoking paraphernalia. But we need to revitalize the Hill, and hopefully this is a big step forward for us.
Good. So we've seen 6 clips this morning. Where can we see this full documentary?
We have actually have a showing coming up at the Dairy Center on Monday night at 6, and otherwise we have a museum installation at the Boulder History Museum, and they show the movie every Sunday at 1 o'clock. And yeah, I highly encourage you to see. It's a 30-minute video. It started out as an 8 to 12-minute project, and yeah, Bruce Borowski with Pixel Mill Studios, he did all the interviews. He came up with about 500 hours of interviews, and he said he could easily make this into an hour movie, and maybe someday we will. But yeah, it's a very interesting time capsule of Boulder, and kind of one perspective on how Boulder has evolved in the last 100 years.
All right. Well, Chris, it is a privilege to get to meet you, to get to hear your story and have a chance to even just talk to you sitting at the table there.
Thanks for having me.
Just join me, everyone, in thanking Chris Heinritz for being here this morning. Thanks a lot. It was really good.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And also, John, thank you for being with us here today, and thank you for your ongoing sponsorship. I know it's only about 9:30, but who's ready for a beer and a burger? I definitely am. Well, again, thank you. You know, it goes without mentioning that the hospitality, the bar, the restaurant, and the tourism economic impact here in Boulder is just substantial, right? Make a nod, you know, to that horsepower, if you will, that drives our economy. So we're just so thankful to have an institution like the Sink being here, and I think you've made a lot of us hungry, and we're going to go check out the artwork here really, really soon. So thank you so much. It's time now for our keynote address. We are extremely privileged to have the individual that will be introduced here in a second with us today. But as we have a tradition here, Elevations Credit Union and Dennis Paul will introduce our speaker. Just a couple of words about Dennis. He serves as the Vice President of Government Affairs and Strategic Partnerships for Elevations Credit Union. For those of you who have been around town, he sits on, I'm going to say, countless boards, or has sat on countless boards and committees. His commitment and Elevation's commitment to the community is substantial. I'll also note that his commitment to the Boulder Chamber and the Boulder Economic Council has been substantial, and I also want to point out Jerry Agnes here, who's with us today, and you go back to the beginning with the Boulder Economic Council, so we very much appreciate your all support. And I'll also say Dennis is our incoming chair for the Board of Directors for the Boulder Chamber here. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dennis Paul from Elevations Credit Union.
Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Sternberg. Let's give Scott a round of applause. It's public knowledge at this point, bittersweet, that the BEC is losing Scott. I was talking to John, and we were wondering, I wonder if he understands the abandonment issues that we have. I don't know. But on a serious note, the one good thing is I do quantum science as a side gig, so I think our paths will cross for sure. Well, good morning and welcome. On behalf of the Board of Directors and the leadership team at Elevations Credit Union, we're thrilled that you're here. I'm Dennis Paul. I'm our Vice President of Government Affairs and Strategic Partnerships. We are honored to co-present this morning's program with our partners at CU Boulder. As many of you are aware, Elevations has its roots at the University of Colorado, having literally started on the steps of Mackey Auditorium 72 years ago. Today, our relationship with CU is stronger than it's ever been. Elevations is proud to support scholarship, mental health initiatives, DE&I programs, and so many more critical initiatives on campus. We wish to thank Chancellor DeStefano and his team for all the support they've shown our organization over that 72 years. As a full-service, not-for-profit financial cooperative, Elevation serves over 177,000 of your friends and colleagues in Colorado and across the globe. We seek to position our members for success as they strive to reach their financial goals. Elevations is a two-time recipient of the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. The Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award is the highest level of national recognition for performance excellence that a U.S. organization can receive. And I should give Tony was talking about acronyms. He did mention NIST briefly. NIST is the governing body of the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, so we really, that partnership's been stunning for us. We take pride in our commitment to excellence and continuous improvement, and it shows in our member loyalty and longevity. From mortgages to business banking to commercial lending and everything in between, we encourage you to check us out at elevationcu.com. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Tom Cech. Dr. Cech is a distinguished professor of biochemistry at CU Boulder. He shared the Nobel Prize in 1989 in chemistry with Sidney Altman for their independent discoveries of the catalytic properties of RNA. In addition to being a Nobel laureate, Dr. Cech has been recognized by numerous scientific organizations, including the European Molecular Biology Organization and the National Academy of Medicine, and in 1995 was awarded the National Medal of Science. As president of the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, he was a staunch advocate for science education. In 2009, after nearly a decade as the president of HHMI, Dr. Cech stepped down to return to teaching and research. Returning to Boulder, Dr. Cech became the first executive director of the BioFrontiers Institute, a position he held until 2020. His current research aims to understand various roles of RNA in cancer. Dr. Cech will be speaking to us this morning about Boulder biotech and stories of RNA. Truly an icon and economic engine in his own right, please help me welcome Dr. Cech to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Great to be here. Always enjoy interacting with people other than just all the students and colleagues that I interact with who I love, but it's important for us to break down some of the barriers that I think always arise between the university people and the community. So because of the audience today, I am going to talk about Boulder Biotech, but I'm also going to show a little bit of of the professor in me and tell you a little bit about ribonucleic acid at a level that is similar to the book that I'm writing for the general public right now, RNA for the Masses, okay? So it's not the title of the book, but that's the content of the second half of my talk. This is our Jenny Smalley Crothers Biotechnology building, where both the Biochemistry Department and the BioFrontiers Institute, as well as the Department of Chemical and Biological Engineering, reside. It's the largest building in Boulder. We're not proud of that, but it is LEED Platinum certified, so we have as light a footprint on the environment as we can. And I was told this would activate. Yes, okay. So the first part of the talk is going to be CU Boulder as a biotech catalyst. I know it's a catalyst of other kinds of tech as well. And then the second part is RNA, which I'm going to proclaim RNA is the future. And I'll talk about 4 aspects of RNA science, each of which have an entrepreneurial sort of legacy and spin-off as well. So at the university, we always look at work at the crossroads of commerce and research. Certainly our teaching of students, both at the undergraduate level and the graduate level, and discovering new knowledge are our primary mission, but we do not neglect the fact that we can have an impact on the world if we commercialize some of our discoveries. Here's a few examples of things that came out of, and these are just a handful of hundreds, right? But some that are close to me. Larry Gold founded SomaLogic in the year 2000 and has figured out how to make RNA or modified DNA to recognize specific proteins in the human blood serum, and identify them quantitatively. The company now has more than 7,000 proteins that they can identify, and the changes of these proteins over time can prognosticate health and wellness, but also coming disease. So if a cancer patient is going to have a relapse, if a smoker is going to actually get lung cancer or not. And another example of our entrepreneurship is my colleague Leslie Leinwand in the molecular biology department. She is a cardiac researcher, one of the best in the country, and she's been interested in a long time in the problem that mutations in a heart protein can cause athletes to fall over. Some of the strongest, healthiest, most buff people they fall over of a heart attack because of this hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. That's hard to say. I'm not going to try again. And so she discovered a mouse model, developed a mouse model of this disease, did some drug screening, and co-founded a company to develop an effective treatment, which MyoKardia then launched. It's called Camzyos. It's been approved by the Federal Drug Administration and is now saving lives. And the company was acquired in 2020 by Bristol Myers Squibb for a price tag of $14 billion before they had their first product. But now they do have the product. And then one more example. In September, Harvard and MIT announced the first ever of their new Merkin Prize in biomedical technology. So guess who won? The guy whose office is next to mine, Marv Carruthers, Distinguished Professor of Biochemistry. What did he do that was so important? He figured out how to chemically synthesize DNA, which made possible the biotechnology revolution worldwide, polymerase chain reaction, which we use, for example, for viral tests, so the diagnostics, all of the forensic science, all of the NCIS when they're figuring out who did the crime. You need these synthetic DNA to do this. 23andMe to trace your family history. All of this comes from Marv's work, and that was done here at the University of Colorado. So he won the $400,000 prize, and it's being awarded to Marv here. Marv's on the right, by Harold Varmus, a Nobel laureate who was also the former director of the National Institutes of Health. Some of the companies that Marv co-founded were Amgen in Thousand Oaks, California, Applied Biosystems, which made the first DNA synthesizers, and Array Biopharma here in Boulder. So more generally, this BioFrontiers Institute that I'm part of has a mission, part of its mission, to translate the inventions and discoveries of its faculty to make a societal impact. And about half of our core faculty and several of our former students and postdocs have already founded companies. In the last decade in our existence, we have more than 150 patents and patent applications. This is a small fraction of what the University of Colorado has, but then we're just 18 people, so we have a pretty good, we have a pretty good punch for our size. We also lease space in the building on a temporary basis because eventually it may be needed for academic purposes to biotech companies. And 19 companies have occupied this space since the building opened in 2012. Some of them have had to move out because they've been so successful that they needed more space than what we were able to offer. And this has really been a win-win situation. It allows our students to rub shoulders with industrial people and sometimes end up getting a job with one of these companies. The hiring recently, I think you will see that these are people who probably will add to this sort of entrepreneurial legacy. So Jason Burdick was a full professor at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and we were able to recruit him as the Bowman Endowed Professor of Chemical and Biological Engineering in 2022. He is making tissues in the laboratory that will help with wound healing after major tissue damage, including self-healing tissues. You can see he already has company connections for this work. Sammy Ramsey, who we hired from Maryland, works on honeybee diseases and colony collapse, and it works particularly on the varroa mite, which is the major source of honeybee colony collapse in the world. And again, if he is successful, there will be certainly spin-offs of this work. And Jennifer Hill, who's actually not arrived yet in Boulder, but is going to be here next year, she works on the microbiome. These are all of the bacteria that are in all of our tissues, in our gut, and on our skin. And they are not just sort of hanging out there, but they also are influencing our own health and disease. And she in particular works on the microbiome's contribution to pancreatic development and also diabetes. So I'm going to take a breath, and now I'm going to attempt to get you excited about something that you didn't know when you came here this morning, how exciting this was going to be. But it is, believe me. And it's going to be fairly short. It's going to move along. So if there's any part of it that isn't great, hang on just for a second. It'll get great in a minute. Okay, so I'm going to talk about RNA is the future. And the first part of this is the stabilized mRNA vaccines, which are going to transition into a new class of therapeutic agents. So DNA is saying still single. So, RNA is really informationally the same as DNA, but it's just one strand instead of a double helix. And this allows it to fold up within itself into a myriad number of shapes, which can do all kinds of things, as you will see, way beyond just being a message. So it does have this messenger function, but it can do a lot more than that as well. And so I would claim that 1953, Watson and Crick double helix, up to 2000, the announcement of the Human Genome Project, that was the age of DNA, but now we are in, as you will see, the age of RNA. So by now, all of you have at least heard of RNA because of the mRNA vaccines, and pictured here, strand of mRNA inside of a lipid nanoparticle, remarkably similar in size and actually sort of in structure to the virus itself. Who would have thought, right? The virus also has this fatty so-called lipid shell on the outside, and it has RNA on the inside. So if you read social media, open your phone or read magazines or books, newspapers, sometimes people talk about mRNA as a medicine, mRNA as a drug, and I think when we talk about it that way, it tends to frighten people, it tends to make them suspicious of it. So it's important for all of you to tell your neighbors and your families that mRNA is natural, it is organic. It's in every cell in our body, and it's in all of the food that we eat. And how does it work? How does this message thing works? Well, the double helix has these bits of information. There are 4 different colors here in the DNA on the left, the A, G, C, and T of the DNA, and that is just copied into the same information in the form of a messenger RNA which carries that message from the DNA outside of the cell nucleus where the proteins are made, and then it specifies the order of amino acids that are laid down in a protein. And proteins are the doers and shakers in all of our cells. They are the actomyosin that makes our muscles move. They're the pepsin enzyme in your stomach that is breaking down the breakfast that you had a little while ago. Those are all proteins. So each of those proteins has a specific gene that encodes it and a messenger RNA that carries that message to the protein synthetic machinery. And the code's very simple. It's each of the amino acids has one or a few triplets of the RNA that encode it. So, for example, GCA means put down an alanine in the protein next. UGG means put down a tryptophan. So how do vaccines work? Well, they just sort of give a heads up to our immune system. They said, you need to be on the lookout for something, okay? So it's really the same principle as how after you get a viral infection, you tend to have some protection towards getting it again, right? Once you have measles or mumps or chickenpox, some of you may be old enough to before the vaccines, right? I was. So once you have these childhood diseases, you're not going to get them again because your immune system is already on the lookout for them. And what is it looking for? Well, it has to be looking for something that's on the outside of the virus because that's what you would see, right? You can't see into it, so be looking on the outside. For the coronavirus, these are the spike proteins. And instead of giving people the virus, which could be dangerous, you instead can give them just the spike protein, which is not dangerous at all, and then that will prime the immune system to be on the lookout for anything that has that spike protein, and there's only one thing that has it, and that's SARS-CoV-2. So how do you make that spike protein to make a vaccine? Well, the way that, textbook would tell you to do it would be to start out with the gene, and copy it into the messenger RNA, and then make that into the protein, and that could be done in the laboratory, and then you could, or in a factory, and then you could give the protein to people as a vaccine, and there are vaccines that work pretty well that just use the protein. But what some smart people at BioNTech in Mainz, Germany, and at Moderna in Cambridge, Massachusetts figured out was that maybe you can do a shortcut. Maybe you can just give people the mRNA, a shot in the arm, and then allow the human cells to translate that mRNA into the spike protein. and that turned out to work very well. And the major advantages of these mRNA vaccines are, first of all, you get a free signal amplification. Each messenger RNA makes about 1,000 of those spike proteins. So you're giving less stuff in the shot than you would give if you had to give the protein. Very adaptable. Quick to, if a new variant of a virus comes along, it takes literally a week to figure out how to remake the vaccine, and then it takes months to actually get approval for it and to get and to manufacture it. But very adaptable compared to previous technologies. And the safety factor is that because you're not giving people the virus, the vaccine can't infect you. But there are also considerable challenges, as we've all seen. All those of you who've had vaccination and then got COVID, you know about this. First of all, the immunity starts to fade in 6 to 12 months. And then secondly, the virus is mutating all the time, and that allows it to avoid immunity, and it makes the vaccines that you had before not ineffective, but less effective than it was. So what is the future of the stabilized RNA? Well, certainly we're going to have more vaccines. We're hoping for a seasonal flu vaccine that actually matches the strains that are circulating. Now, the flu vaccines currently range from year to year. They're typically 40 to 60% efficacious, sometimes as low as 20%. It's not very good, is it? But if we could very quickly look at what flu is out there seasonally and then make the vaccine instead of trying to predict it ahead of time, we could do much better. Personalized cancer vaccines are not only on the horizon, there are already clinical trials that have had very promising results, so I think that will be coming down the line as an entirely new approach for cancer treatment and perhaps cancer prophylaxis. And how about restoring proteins that are mutated in, for example, sickle cell disease or muscular dystrophy, cystic fibrosis, thalassemias? That's more, what should I say, speculative. We don't know yet. The science would say that this is possible, but there are a lot of pitfalls in between a good scientific idea and an actual pharmaceutical, so we don't know. Next RNA topic. And by the way, you may have to just pull the plug at some point. How are we doing, Scott? Okay, 15 minutes? Okay, I think I'll be okay. All right, so what can RNA do if it isn't a message? And there are really dozens of major activities that RNA have that doesn't rely on this coding capacity, as important as that is. And one thing that RNA can do is it can be a biocatalyst. We call these ribozymes for ribonucleic acid with enzymatic activity. And at CU Boulder in 1982, my lab was studying an RNA splicing process in this pond animal, single-celled organism called Tetrahymena thermophila. It's a relative of Paramecium, which you may remember looking at in the microscope in perhaps elementary school. And this RNA rearrangement reaction called splicing, we figured had to be catalyzed by protein enzymes because for 100 years people had known that all biochemical reactions that occur with this sort of speed and specificity have to be catalyzed. They don't just happen spontaneously. And all enzymes are proteins. So we looked for this protein, couldn't find it, thought maybe it was contaminating our reactions, maybe some tetrahymena protein was sneaking into our test tubes and allowing the splicing to occur. And finally, at a Christmas party, my graduate student, Paula Grabowski, gave me this Christmas present. Is there a protein or is there not? And it turned out that even more exciting than purifying the first splicing protein enzymes, we found that it didn't need a protein, that the RNA by itself folded up into a specific intricate structure and catalyzed the splicing reaction. And this led to the 1989 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. We just heard about 1989 at the Cech. Okay, well, we couldn't be at the Cech because we had to be in Stockholm for this party, along with my young daughter, and my youngest daughter was too young to even be allowed to go to the ceremony. We also tried to do something good for people in terms of health with these catalytic RNAs, and we founded a company called Ribozyme Pharmaceuticals, 1992 in Boulder. It went public in 96, was traded on NASDAQ, and it eventually was rebranded as siRNA, sirna, and although it was a huge commercial success, back in 2006, this 1.1 billion was real money. And by the way, I was gone by then. I was in DC fighting the Beltway traffic as president of Howard Hughes by this time, so I did not share in this largesse. But so it was a commercial success, and we did help launch RNA biotechnology more generally, but it was disappointing that so far there have been no approved ribozyme pharmaceuticals, although these things take a long time and it's still possible. Now, the next thing that RNA can do is it can bestow immortality. Wow, that's a pretty big claim, right? At the cellular level, okay, maybe not at the organism level. And the RNA machine that does this is called telomerase, and it acts on the ends of our chromosomes. These are vulnerable places. They need protection. Here's a little molecular probe that's lighting up all of the ends, the specific DNA that's at the ends of all of our chromosomes. And this protection of the chromosome strand is just like the plastic tips on shoelaces. What are those called? Somebody will know the word. Aglets, yeah, right. Use that every day, right? So just like the aglets, there has to be something special on the ends of our chromosomes. And in the absence of a way to keep restoring them, these ends of the chromosome shrink as the cells divide. And when they get too short, then signals the cell to stop dividing. Now, that's actually a good thing for most of our cells, because when you became an adult, your cells didn't stop dividing, you would get really, really large. But in addition to that, cancer is a disease of continuous growth of cells. So what is the enzyme that builds out the ends of these chromosomes? Well, it's a non-coding RNA molecule, shown here as the purple strand, and it serves as a template to add sequences to the ends of our chromosomes, and thereby builds out the chromosomes when we're an embryo, and it allows cells to proliferate continuously and to become immortal. So this protein that works with the RNA was discovered in the Cech lab by a Swiss postdoctoral fellow, Joachim Lingner, in the 1990s. And now it's been found to be the third most frequent genetic cause of cancer. It's quite remarkable that in many, many different cancers, but just to take melanoma as an example, each year, independently, 400,000 people around the world are unlucky enough to stumble upon a single base pair change in the gene for this TERT protein that we discovered, and that grows up and makes their melanoma immortal. And this happens independently. So this is clearly a powerful cancer driver, because whenever a tumor stumbles upon this mutation in the TERT gene, that particular cell grows up and becomes the whole tumor. So although telomerase can be a bad thing when it's activated in cancer, there's also the flip side of this, that low telomerase activities make it hard for our stem cells to keep dividing. And so there are genetic diseases of telomerase insufficiency where it would be nice to have a way of boosting up the telomerase levels and allowing those cells to continue to proliferate. And my final example of a non-coding RNA is going to be that RNA can guide genome editing. And this, again, is going to be a whole new class of therapeutic agents. This was figured out by Emmanuel Charpentier, Jennifer Doudna, who won the Nobel Prize just a couple of years ago for figuring out how this CRISPR system could be used for gene editing. We were very excited about this in Boulder because Jennifer trained in my laboratory at CU. And here she is, along with some other graduates at a reunion that we had in 2007. Now, how does this CRISPR work? Well, it cleaves DNA, but it's not as simple as the little red scissors here. Instead, it carries a guide RNA along with it, shown here in pink and yellow, that when it matches a particular sequence in the DNA, then it locks down, and a protein associated with the RNA called Cas9 then cleaves the DNA, both strands, so it has to cleave twice. And after that cleavage occurs, then the human cell has DNA repair machinery, and that's when the gene editing takes place. The CRISPR just does the cutting, the natural cellular repair processes do the stitching up. And what are the possible medical potentials? Well, first of all, you can get rid of bad genes, but that actually has rather limited uses. There are some cases, such as when the HIV virus integrates into a human chromosome, where you would like to just be able to cut that out and destroy it. But in general, genes aren't completely bad. They are simply mutated or misfunctioning in a way that is disease-causing. So repairing those faulty genes is really the enormous potential of CRISPR, because most diseases either are genetic or they have a genetic component, and I list a few examples there. And as we try to implement this CRISPR technology, we also have to be very aware of ethical considerations, germline DNA editing that would lead to permanently inherited changes in all of your offspring, all of your children and grandchildren forevermore, are considered to be premature by responsible scientists right now. There's also concern that CRISPR genome editing might be used to enhance characteristics such as height, weight, hair color, making people look prettier, so-called enhancements. We don't think that that's an ethical use of the technology. It should be used instead to cure disease. And what if the advantages are only available in a few countries or only available to the rich? Those are certainly ethical considerations that we talk about all the time, but are difficult. So our feeling now is we should really try to manage these ethical issues rather than using them to ban the use of CRISPR in humans, but we need to think about them seriously. So there are a lot of CRISPR biotechnology companies. There are many more than this, but these 5 are the national leaders, and they already have already in clinical trials to try to cure diseases such as sickle cell disease using CRISPR. In Boulder, we have 3 companies, a branch of Editas, which is headquartered in Boston, Inscripta, and Umoja is also using CRISPR technology. So what I said today then was, first of all, that CU Boulder is a biotech catalyst, and the biotechnology that we do is much broader than just RNA, but RNA is an exciting part of it. And the RNA technology is, first of all, allows us to use stabilized messenger RNA for vaccines or therapeutics. RNA can be a catalyst. It can bestow immortality at the cellular level, either for good or for bad, and it can guide the editing of the human genome to erase mutations which are disease-causing. And I have a book coming out sometime next year by W.W. Norton called The Catalyst, where I'm going to try to explain RNA to the general public. And my research group thanks you for your attention. Do we have time for a few questions, or it's up to you?
Check. Yeah, we do. I was just going to take the bully pulpit and ask the first one, if that's okay.
Your microphone looks a little short for you there.
Yeah, it is a little short. So first of all, thank you so much. I mean, the backdrop of this for many in the room is we have had national attention now in bringing biosciences companies into not just Colorado, but locally here in Boulder in the US 36 corridor region. I will say that the CEOs and the site selectors and the folks that are looking to relocate these organizations or start up here in Boulder, all of them say that they want to be in close proximity to CU, to BioFrontiers, and sometimes even to you. And so it is just such an amazing story that you've told here. I guess, for the group, you have a unique perspective around the country as to how universities are migrating out their technology through an organization like BioFrontiers or the resources there. Can you give us some perspective of how CU is ranking in terms of us proliferating the technology out to the businesses that...
So do you mean the process, or where it's happening, or
just how we rank, compared to all of the other biocenters around the country?
Well, I think the Front Range in Colorado is certainly does not have the density or the number of companies that the two biggest places have, and that's South San Francisco in the Bay Area, and the Cambridge-Boston area. Those are really I don't think we have any chance of ever catching them. And the reason is that a lot of these startup companies their longevity is unknown, right? They're doing high-risk, high-reward work. They're trying to do something that's never been done before, and therefore failure is certainly something that can happen. And so the people who work at these companies want to be in a place where if their company has problems, or if there's no way they can get promoted, they can go across the street to another company. And we're not quite in that category. However, we're sort of in the next group below that, which would also include San Diego, Seattle, Research Triangle in North Carolina. Boulder might be, around the 10th biggest area. And at least our students who graduate from the building that I showed you, the Jenny Smalley Carruthers Biotechnology Building, are often so excited about their time in Colorado, about the community here, about the environment, and are not looking forward to living in a traffic congested city. And so they often get a job in biotech locally here at a very high success rate, usually immediately upon graduation.
Well, Dr. Cech, thank you so much for joining us here today. I think we're all substantially smarter than we were when we came into the room. Very much appreciate your bringing what is incredibly, complex and scientifically driven information down to the masses. So look forward to your book, and please join me in thanking Dr. Cech for the... Oh. I guess if you're okay, I didn't realize we had one more question coming up in the back.
Hi. First, I have to congratulate you. That was one of the best presentations from someone with your scientific background. Very simple for all of us. Two questions. One is, I interviewed John Zinn, the person who brought CRISPR to Boulder, to the campus, BioFrontiers. I interviewed him years ago. And can you tell us where he is now? The second question is, I have great expertise on the microbiome. Can you, and all of our work is done on that right now, can you confirm or disagree with the fact that it's our belief that 70% of human immune system is taking place in our gut, in our microbiome, 50 trillion with a T, 50 trillion bacteria. We've created a menu planner to actually feed them so they produce positive chemicals, GABA, serotonin, dopamine, and butyric acid. Would you agree that maybe 70%, up to 70% of our immune system comes from the gut?
Yes, from the small intestine.
Pardon?
Yes, from the small intestine.
Yes. And can, correct. And
The actual immune cells are made in the bone marrow.
yes.
And in the thymus, right, the B and T cells.
Our partner was an expert. He was with the baby in the bubble back at Baylor College of Medicine, and he's been working on that for 55 years. The other question, John Zinn, can you tell us where he is? CRISPR's inventor?
I'm sorry, who's the name of the person?
John Zinn? He was.
I don't know, sorry.
All right. Thank you. I interviewed him to see you.
So at this point, we're going to take a quick break. I just want to say that, you know, as I said earlier, when we talk to CEOs, talk to graduate students that are coming into the community in the biosciences industry, we have a lot to offer. And I think, you know, obviously Dr. Cech and the laboratory and the BioFrontiers Institute that you've spun up is an incredible asset that we have to attract biosciences and biotechnology companies here on the Front Range and specifically here in Boulder. So again, please join me in thanking Dr. Tom Cech. You're an absolute jewel in our community, and we appreciate you being here today. So believe it or not, we're running about on time. We would love to take a break right now for about 25 minutes. We have a number of organizations that have chosen to join us today that are very embedded in our communities. With 25 minutes or so, if you could sort of take a break and have a cup of coffee and talk to some of the folks that have joined us today, we'll reconvene back here at 10:30 for the mid-morning session. Thank you. Well, welcome back. I'll give you a couple more minutes to top off your coffee and come back and sit down, and then we'll get started. I always hate my job sometimes when I have to break up networking conversations at meetings like this. It's just so great to see everybody getting a chance to talk to people in person and interacting here. So thank you so much for coming back. Just a bit of an explanation. As we had a conversation around the programming for this event this past year, we thought we would do something a little bit different. It came from a quote from one of our illustrious Boulder Economic Council Executive Committee members, and saying, we love the 30,000 foot stuff, but it would be really great to hear from real people who are facing real challenges and creating real solutions in our community. And so that was the impetus behind building this panel that are organized topically, such as workforce development or advanced manufacturing or technology or whatever the case may be. We are trying an experiment where we have 5 people from around our community that represent certain areas that we believe are mostly responsible for some of the trends that we're experiencing as our economy is evolving. So that's the theory here, and I'm very much looking forward to that. So before we get started, I would like to introduce the model. I've known Jessica for at least the 3 years that I've been employed in this role, and she brings an enormous amount of experience in economic development, ranging from, I'm going to say, perhaps not in order, Broomfield, Thornton, Office of Economic Development Trade, and most recently at the Longmont Economic Development Partnership, until she transitioned into her current role with Sun Construction as Director of Business Development. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica Erickson as today's moderator for the panel that we're calling Reports from Around Our Economy. So with that, Jessica.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to do my best here this morning. I am recovering from COVID, so where I lost my entire voice, and this is the most voice that I've had in the last week. So bear with me. I'm going to be drinking a lot of water, and we'll get through it. So thank you for being here this morning. Thank you to Scott and to John and the Chamber and BEC for including me in this event, and in particular in this conversation and this panel. The topic I was provided was that of our evolving economy. It's a topic that I have a great deal of interest in from a variety of perspectives, and so I'm just excited for the opportunity to be able to facilitate that conversation. Talk a little bit about the perspectives that I bring to the conversation. One, in my current role as Director of Business Development for Sun Construction. For those of you who don't or aren't familiar with Sun Construction, we are a commercial industrial general contractor that specializes in highly technical, high barrier to entry environments. So we build out specialized spaces within the life sciences industry, within technology, the government sector, and advanced manufacturing sectors primarily. And so our interest is not just in what does our economy hold in the future for the construction industry, but also all of those industries in which we're part of the value chain. I'm also, as Scott mentioned, a recovering economic development professional, having had a 20-year career in economic development here in Colorado. And so the other perspective is I'm just kind of a nerd about this stuff. So I'm really excited to hear what these folks have to say. And then finally, I think most importantly is my perspective on the conversation as a parent. I have a stepson who is 18 and a senior in high school, who started his high school career in the fall of 2020. She was born March 12th of 2020. Call her baby zero of the COVID generation. So arguably two of the most disrupted and also generations with the most uncertain future of any, certainly in my lifetime. And so my ability to be a part of, to learn from conversations like these, hopefully will help me prepare them for that very uncertain future. The Chamber has done an excellent job of bringing together a panel of experts who also bring varied perspectives to this conversation, where we hopefully will touch on some of the trends, challenges, and opportunities that will shape our economies in the coming years. And so with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists, starting on the far left, Chris Houston, who is the Director of Apprenticeships for Front Range Community College. And then Bhavna Chabra, who is Senior Director Engineering. Oh, sorry, wrong order. Not Becky Gamble. Trent Hein, who is co-CEO at Rule 4. And then Becky Gamble, President of Dean Callan and Company, and Steve Willett, President at ROI Alliance. Thank you all for joining us this morning. So I'm going to start by giving each of you the opportunity to introduce and tell us more about, so I'll start with you at the end, Chris.
Thank you. I work as the Director of the Apprenticeships at Front Range Community College, and I'm here in place of our college president, Dr. Colleen Simpson, who's unable to join us because of a family emergency. And I wanted to just talk about the background that I bring as a 28-year veteran at the college. I now work in the area of workforce development. And I think my perspective as developing apprenticeships are a unique opportunity for our learners to earn and learn in jobs in Colorado. Of the 3.25 million workers in Colorado, only 6,400 of them are in an apprenticeship role, which is a paid training opportunity. Our workforce in Colorado really has a huge skills gap, and our community college system has about 180,000 students that are involved in our system, and these are workers for the future as we try to work to continue to develop their skills and meet that skills gap to promote the workforce that's needed.
Great, thank you. And Bhavna?
Hi, so I have two roles, bringing both perspectives, and actually getting personal, I have three roles, I guess. I'm also a mom. I am an engineering leader of a team that's set out across Boulder, Colorado, New York, and the Bay Area. And then in addition to that, I'm the site lead of Google Boulder that has about 1,800 employees here. Many more that don't come into the office that are remote employees, also in Colorado, and folks moved around during COVID. So what's happened as a result of the pandemic, where we're going, is of real interest to me. The other one is finding some commonality there. I have a 22-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 4-year-old. So I'm in the same boat you are in terms of figuring out where my kids are, how they're going to succeed, and all the uncertainty that's happening in life right now. Oh, and I'm not going to talk a lot about Google right now because I think most of, Google it. We're 180,000 people across the country, across the world, and we've been, let's just say, meandering our way through all the things that have happened as a result of the pandemic.
Great, thank you. Trent?
Hey, I'm Trent Hein. I'm currently co-CEO of Rule 4. And I have been in Boulder as an entrepreneur for the last 32 years. Rule 4 is actually my third company here in the professional services space. And so one of my passions is obviously being an entrepreneur and how to build businesses in a tightly knit community, which I think Boulder is. But then how do we staff a workforce? So in professional services, our product is our people, and so where do we find the raw materials? Where do we find those people, and how do we keep them here in Boulder long term so that we can build businesses around them? I will say I'm also a parent. I have a son here at CU, go Buffs, and I have a daughter now at the University of Oregon, go Ducks. I have to say both of those. I know, we've somehow failed to keep her here. But as I look at their career path and where their futures are, I definitely have to ask myself some questions of like, what are we building as a community to give folks good long-term career paths?
Great. And Becky?
Hi, good morning. Becky Gamble, CEO of Dean Callan and Company, which is a commercial real estate company that we are this year celebrating our 60th birthday here in Boulder. So, yeah, thank you. Not quite like the sink, but we're working our way there. I think what I bring, or this morning, it's exciting to me, a lot of different perspectives. I am, as some people say, a freak of nature, native of Boulder. So I have been here a very long time, minus 8 years that I went away for college and fiddled around for a little bit, but I've seen some dramatic changes, as perhaps many of you here as well. So my perspective comes from that, but from the real estate perspective, commercial real estate is impacted by so many things, from geopolitical to local banking, and then obviously now what the pandemic has done, and specifically to the office market. So this is the first time ever in my career that I've seen downtown office vacancies hit almost 30%. And for a perspective for everybody, a healthy market is like 10% or less. So there's a lot of things to think about as we talk about commercial real estate, how to get people back to the office, what that looks like, repositioning different assets, and making those assets attractive to help companies get their people back into the office.
Great, and then Steve?
Hey everybody, I'm Steve Willett. I'm the president of the ROI Alliance. It's a management group, management consulting group, where I also do lots of training. I can also do statistical design and analysis of surveys, of processes, process optimization. Probably more relevant for my topic today, which is kind of the AI intersection with business. It's also about finding what the optimum metrics of success are for a company, helping them create their own metrics, cascade or translate those down into the organization, all the way to the front line of management, and then into the process itself. So those of you that might be doing manufacturing, or those of you that might be providing services, how the people who are at the front line, the value creators of your company, are actually looking at and improving their own processes over time. That's where the kind of the intersection with this thing called AI, which I can get into a little bit more later, would have an influence in what's going on right now. So you may have heard about AI in the news, not sure, but if you have, I'm not an expert in AI, but I have seen how it interacts with business, and so I can speak to that.
Great, thank you all. As you know, our theme this morning is our evolving economy. So I'm hoping, and I'm going to open this up to whoever wants to answer, if all of you want to provide an answer, or if some of you feel like you have more to say on the topic than others, but really just from your kind of narrow sphere of influence, how do you see that evolving relative to the economy in both the near and long terms? Steve, you look like you want to start.
I can always talk. Well, okay, so let me focus in on AI, because I do a broad spectrum of things for the companies that I consult with, but focusing in on AI, we have to be careful what we mean by AI, because if you haven't seen what that actually is, there are kind of different categories of what AI is, and particularly in the business context. So generally, the stuff that I deal with is stuff that's a consequence of machine learning, which is you're giving data to some sort of an algorithm. There are a bunch of different types of algorithms, and then they do something with it. So one example might be an expert system. So an expert system would sit and watch as an expert does something, and then it learns from that expert. So things like medical diagnoses or running mills can all be done via expert systems. Large language models, that's the one that you've probably heard about with ChatGPT, where it looks at a whole bunch of text and then it knows nothing, but it says, oh, when these words come together, it's typically followed by this word. So it can sometimes surprise you with its depth and sometimes shock you with its incorrectness. But people use them for generating copy for their businesses, online blogs and that kind of thing. It can be very useful for that. I tend to use it to generate that, and then I get so annoyed at the answer that I write a better one in response. Sometimes in business you see vision systems, systems that use input from a camera or something, which can use any of those various learning models to detect maybe defects in something that's been manufactured, or ways of improving things. Can check dimensions as well. I've worked with some of those and seen some pretty spotty performance there. And the one I probably would focus on today, just because of my background, is specific problem solving. This uses data to find solutions for businesses. So example could be like spam filters, what customers want to buy next from you, and more recently finding, forming, and testing hypotheses within the business context. So the promise is vast, but the downside is vast as well, because as you might expect, as with any computer system, garbage in, garbage out. And what I found is two disconnects. One, on the business side, when you have somebody come in who's a data scientist who says, look at all these amazing things that Amazon can do with AI and predict their customers, and we can do that for you, which is technically true. But on the business side, you have to know what your business is about. You have to have the correct metrics of success for your business, have translated those down into the organization so that people are measuring the right stuff. Because if you don't measure the right stuff and you put that into your AI in the future, it's not going to know what's going on, and it's going to find all sorts of stuff that doesn't help you. So my second book, called Galileo's Telescope, was based on this premise of you've got this new telescope called AI, or big data analysis, and if you just point it randomly up in the sky, you could find something interesting, but you could find something irrelevant. But what Galileo knew to do is where to point it. He pointed it at Jupiter, and what conclusions to make from that. So it answered a particular question that he had, which had to do with the sun-centered view of the solar system. So using AI to answer the business questions that human people have when they're providing products and services for humans is kind of one of those leading edge things that I would say you would want to be thinking about.
Great, thank you. And Becky, I have already been asked the question this morning about kind of the evolution of the commercial real estate industry. So if you could answer that question as well.
I think real estate does a lot of things, and so that's a very big question, the evolution of real estate. And certainly some big mixed-use developments can change the dynamics in cities and what real estate does in transforming downtowns that are obsolete, and they put in big sports facilities and build around that. But as you get right here into Boulder, I think, or Boulder County, one of the biggest transformations we've certainly, well, there's two, but one of them, and kind of Dr. Cech being here is paramount to this discussion, is the conversions of flex or office space to life science space. And over the last 5 years, we have seen a tremendous amount of equity put into repositioning these assets. We've seen some of the largest life science owners and developers in the country come in and make very significant capital investments as they're looking at Boulder because of the university, because of the talent that's here, and because of the lifestyle that's here. But so there's a couple of things that with that has happened. We haven't seen honestly, a huge impact yet in companies coming in because we haven't had any existing lab space completed. That's changing right now. There's several 100,000 square feet of space that is being developed as spec lab space. And most of that will be coming online end of this year and next year. And I think at that point in time is when we will see a lot of companies move into Boulder that have never been here before, and or startups. So I think that's one big piece of it. The other big piece of it I alluded to a little bit is what to do with all this empty office space. How can some of that be repositioned? Again, Boulder, like it has always been, we're a little bit of a bubble, and we're not facing the same challenges maybe that downtown Denver is or Seattle is. or San Francisco with millions of empty square feet and a homeless issue so that they can really convert some of that product. I think maybe there's a couple down the road, we may see a couple of assets that do that here. But it's more so filling that space back up, and what companies are looking for to get their employees to go back to work, and then what landlords are having to do to their space in order to help the companies get their employees to come back. So it's a marriage really between the two, and it's very fluid right now. Companies still are figuring out what that hybrid model looks like. Is it 2 days a week? Is it 3 days a week? How are we measuring our productivity versus our innovation? The landlords are looking at it. How much money do we need to put into the building to create these amenities for the companies then to go, oh, we want to lease this space because it's got all these amenities we need in order to get our employees to come back. And we're just, I think, still in the beginning of it a little bit, because I think companies, unless if they're lab companies that have to be there every day, are still internally working through what that looks like for them.
Great, thank you. And Trent, certainly the areas of cybersecurity and automation are critical to what we're experiencing right now across a variety of industries, and will certainly be a part of our future. How do you see that evolving in the coming years?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I was talking before I started this session about cybersecurity space in general, which is where I spend most of my time. Today is on one hand, from a business perspective, this market is awesome, right? We are not limited today by sales. We're actually limited by hiring. How fast can we hire and who can we hire? But why is that? That is because the profitability of attacks has continued to increase. So you probably saw in the news these last few weeks this MGM and Caesars attacks. These are attackers who spend their day in their PJs in their basements, pulling in 7 figures regularly. Now it's illegal. I do not recommend this as a career, but they're making really good money, right? Hundreds of millions of dollars in ransoms in the Vegas incidents alone, and the average ransom cost today is $2.2 million. So imagine if you're a small business and unfortunately you get attacked, that's what you or your cyber insurer is likely to pay out. And so on one hand, yeah, the cybersecurity industry is super hot because of all these attackers. Some other time we'll talk about like how did we get here? Like why is it that it's so easy for those guys to make money at this? But when I look at, okay, well what do we need as a business and as a technology community to fight this? Is we need workers who are incredibly able to think critically and solve problems. I was talking to another group last week, and they're like, oh, you need all of these cybersecurity candidates that have a master's or PhD and have done all of these proof of skill exercises and so on. And I was like, no, that's actually not what we need. Is we need people who are really good critical thinkers and really good problem solvers who can then tackle any problem that's put in front of them. Because in cybersecurity, we don't have the luxury of knowing what those problems look like in advance. We get new problems every day. But how that relates to our economy here in Boulder County is we've got to make this an attractive place where the best of the best, whether they're in cybersecurity or they're in software development or they're in life sciences, that this is where they want to live. And I loved Becky's comments about amenities. It's like, if I'm the best of the best, would I go work out of my house in Montana, or should I come move to Boulder and be part of a community that has wonderful amenities for workers, and I have people to both work and play with in the beautiful outdoors of Boulder? Like, the more that we can create that, the more we're going to be able, I think, to drive this economy, which honestly, a lot of our Boulder economy today is some form of knowledge work. And the only way we get and keep those people is make this the best place to live.
Then, Bhavna, to your point, Google is 100,000 people across the globe that arguably both influences and experiences all of the above. So can you, from that perspective, talk about where you see Google evolving to?
Yeah, so correction, 190,000.
Oh, 190,000. Apologies.
Just, it boggles my mind. So I actually want to riff off of something that Becky talked about and Trent talked about. Near and dear to my heart, as it applies to Boulder, is really what you talked about, which is companies figuring out what we want to do from a work-life balance. How do we attract people here? And the pivots, for want of a better word, we have taken during the pandemic. So prior, just to give you a quick history instruction is, prior to the pandemic, Google was a office-first, co-located, highly cohesive team company. So we would have entire teams. So for instance, the Boulder office had a few teams that all worked in the office, and we were office first. You know, you could run errands and so on and so forth, but we really didn't have a lot of policies of allowing people to work from home. Pandemic hit, we, along with other tech companies, went to a complete remote. You know, we were among the early ones, and we went to a complete remote environment. And more importantly, you know that 190,000 people? We hired a large number of those people, something like 70, 80,000 people, during the pandemic as remote workers. And so we offered, along with all the other tech companies, big tech companies, said, you can work in your pajamas in Montana. You don't have to come in. And you know, we will give you all these opportunities, and this is how it's going to be. It worked as long as everyone was remote. Pandemic ends, and then we get into this hybrid thing. Our workers wanted to come back. So we, in Boulder, we are, you know, a Bay Area headquartered company, so we offer all these amenities and perks. I'm sure many of you have read about it. We have on-site massage and great food. I always joke about how the tastiest food is actually at our Google Boulder campus. We have all these things to bring people in. So we started seeing people coming in, and our complete remote and home model started teetering on not doing well, not performing. So individually people could perform well. We found innovation to be difficult and so on. So right now, we're in the process, we're calling it reimagining. It's not a pivot, it's called reimagining. And what we're saying is our employees need to come in, the ones that affiliate with an office need to come in 2 to 3 times a week, and every team needs to have the same days that they come in. We have remote employees. I'd say this is public knowledge. About 20% in the US of our employees are completely remote. But the latest thing is we're actually discouraging new remote employees. We're trying to get people to come into the office. And we're really taking a hard look at what our environments are, going back to what Becky was talking about, the amenities we're providing, how we're gonna do this. I think the jury's still out on how enthusiastically employees are going to take this. We're not doing drastic things like Amazon has, you know, some teams, this is public knowledge. I have to always say that because people assume I know something. Where they say if you don't come into the office, consider it your severance. You know, famously Tesla's done that, and X, what used to be Twitter. We're not that dramatic, but we are starting to monitor people that are coming in. The way it impacts Boulder is Google Boulder has grown organically, for instance, right? And we've always had this sort of growth rate, and we've done real estate investments and real estate projections based on those growth rates. Everything's up in the air at this point. Because we have so many remote employees, we have people that are coming in through a hybrid work week, we're still figuring out what our real estate portfolio looks like as a result. And this has ripple effects to local restaurants and local services. And, we have employees that moved to southern Colorado. Governor Polis is really happy about that. But, for Boulder, they moved hundreds, thousands of miles away. We have people in Montana and Wyoming that don't want to relocate again. So stay tuned. We're figuring it out. But just so that people understand, we're very much, Google has declared that we are going to be doing everything that we can think of to bring people into the office, because we believe that's how innovation happens.
Great, thank you. And then Trent touched on it a little bit. Sorry, I lost my notes. Trent touched on it a little bit regarding the workforce and this idea that they don't know what's coming to be able to know what people need to be trained for from a technical skill perspective. And I've heard it said before that the majority of jobs that our children will have in the future do not exist today. And certainly the apprenticeship program and the community college system are part of contributing to preparing for that future. But what does that evolution look like? How do we prepare for such an unknown future?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I think one thing that we do know is that, Front Range Community College is one of 13 community colleges in Colorado, and 40% of all undergraduate students are in a community college. So community colleges really serve for a pipeline to workforce, and every sector that I talk to, from healthcare to professional services, they're short workers. In Colorado, we know that there is, for every worker that is available to work, which is 68% of Colorado's workforce is working, which is ironic, right? That shows you the gap of unmet workers, right, that could be in there. But of those individuals, we know that 90% of those need some type of post-secondary education in order to fill those roles. And yes, some of those jobs we don't even know about yet. If somebody would have told us about AI or even ChatGPT 5 years ago, there would have been questions about that. So we really work to meet workforce needs by having strong collaboration with our industry partners. And that's really critical in lots of areas, from developing corporate training programs to developing apprenticeships. But one of the biggest needs in Colorado is that skills gap. So 76% of the Tier 1 jobs require bachelor's degrees, but 43% of people in Colorado have a bachelor's degree. And we're an educated state, okay? Half the people that start in an institution of higher ed don't complete it within 6 years. So we need to reimagine kind of your point about how we're educating our workforce, because we're not going to be able to meet the needs of all of these thriving companies and all the companies that you work with if we don't build an educated workforce. And I think a lot of that we're starting to unpack those barriers, the cost of higher education. And I think apprenticeships offer a unique opportunity because there are so many people that aren't able to stop the living wage ability so that they can go back and retrain into higher skills. In Colorado, 40% of the jobs are low-wage jobs. In Boulder County, that's 47%. These are people that are making incomes of around $30,000 a year. So these are huge impacts that impact our economy. And when we start to look at those pieces, everything from housing and everything from commuting, those all impact the ability for people to come back to work. If you live 90 miles away from where you work, you're a whole lot less likely to want to drive in than if you can just have your internet at home. So I think there's a lot of challenges, but I think the community college is a really pivotal point to promote the workforce by providing that skills gap education.
Great, thank you. And then, Bhavna, I'd be interested in hearing your perspective as well. Trent mentioned kind of with the unknown of the future and the technical skills that are going to be required of his future employees, what he's really looking for today in terms of that critical thinking, problem solving, adaptability. Can you speak to that from a Google perspective? What are you all looking for from your workforce to be prepared for what the future holds?
Yeah, I was thinking about that when Chris was speaking, because in that also big tech, that's what I can speak for, Google and other big tech companies have gone through a evolution of thought more along the lines of what Trent has. So years ago, I'm a graduate of CU Boulder, and years ago I would have said, I wasn't born here, but I got here as fast as I could. I got here in college, and I haven't left since. But you know, there was a time where the kind of college you graduated from, whether it was Ivy League, really mattered for some of these jobs and your pedigree of degrees and so on. I think what companies have started realizing is we just need smart people that can think outside the box. A variety of lived experiences, a variety of different education mediums. And so, I mean, I'm proud to speak as a representative of Google in that our interview process and who shows up as a candidate has changed. We have folks that go through, I've hired people that go through community college, that go through boot camps, that go through this, and we do more of a skills-based hiring. That's what you see us moving toward. In fact, we've rolled out, Google has rolled out, among others, this certification programs, which is how do we provide opportunities to close those skills gaps, and then providing those opportunities is not enough on its own. You need to have people that will actually hire them. And I don't have the numbers at the top of my mind, but there is a consortium of several of us companies, Google being one of them, that have joined together and said, yes, we will hire people that are in what I would call non-traditional, high pedigree, if that's what you want to call, college graduate environments. And that has been a change. I think it's good for us here in Boulder because we attract people here that have that can-do, innovative attitude, that like the lifestyle. I don't know what it is, but people that like hiking, climbing, and all these things that we attract people with seem to have that how do I work myself out of getting stuck at dusk on a mountaintop attitude, which is really, believe it or not, has a huge correlation with being able to problem solve. But we provide that now, and I'm glad that we do more of it because that really goes toward the closing the loop, if you will.
Great, thank you. And I have one more question that I'm going to ask before we open it up to the audience that I would like for all of you to answer, maybe in like 2 breaths, if possible, so we can open up as much time for the audience as possible. And I do want to start with Steve because I think it's so top of mind right now relative to AI. But the question is, what are both your greatest hopes and greatest fears for the coming years as it relates to the topic of our evolving economy? And if you don't mind, particularly as it relates to AI, because there are a lot of fears out there, but I think there's also a lot of hope for what that means for our future.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So one thing I think is the fear side of it is AI will replace jobs. There will be people who lose their jobs because of this thing we're calling AI. So as business leaders, you guys need to consider what that means for you, right? You'll be able to increase your productivity in certain areas, get rid of some jobs, but that means there are people who have those skills who just no longer have a job anymore. So that's something that we have not really had to wrestle with prior to this point. So I think that's something to consider. The good side, I think, is we can start to tease out interactions and relationships that we never would have known before if we put the right information in. And so the hope is that we could make our businesses better, make it more responsive to our customers or our clients, make it more efficient and effective, reduce the utilization of natural resources, all by using these interactions that we never would have as humans come up with before. Or even with things like evolutionary algorithms, come up with software solutions that humans would never sit down and come up with. So I think there's both great promise, but also great risks associated with the social fabric and the community coming from AI that we need to start thinking about if we haven't already done that.
Thank you. And Becky, highest hopes and greatest fears?
Greatest fears, I think, would be the affordability of Boulder as time goes on, and not so much in commercial real estate, yes, commercial real estate, but also on the residential side for workforce housing. That does impact companies that think about relocating to Boulder or growing in Boulder, is how far their employees have to come. I also fear would be on I guess the politics side of the equation and being able to manage the city processes as it relates to how homelessness impacts office product and retail product, and how easy it is to just get through the city process in terms of development. Hope is that this is where we live. We live in one of the greatest cities ever. And some of these things are just never going to change in terms of the lifestyle, the intellectual capital, the work, the graduation rates. We have a lot of smart people that are here, but that to me probably will never change, and I think it's something that we all should celebrate really every single day.
Great, thank you. Trent?
So I often say that Boulder is ground zero for tech innovation, at least in the U.S., if not worldwide, right? Like you look at some of the stuff that the companies in Boulder are doing today, it reminds me of maybe what Silicon Valley looked like in the 80s. And so that we're the place to be, and I believe that we are going to be further recognized as that ground zero location for innovation. I think my biggest fear, though, is, and this relates a little bit to some of the things that Becky said, is that we as a community are not able to change rapidly enough to accommodate that, and some of the other changes, right? How do we rapidly change our housing affordability problem? How do we rapidly address our unhoused issue? How do we deal with energy sustainability? And even simple things like parking, right? Is like if we have folks either living in Boulder or commuting to Boulder, they have to park somewhere. And that's a reality I think we're gonna have to wrestle with. It sounds silly, but if we can't do that, like I have had people in my office say, hey, yeah, I don't want to come into the office because I can't find a place to park. And so we've got to be willing to make some hard decisions and changes pretty rapidly so that we don't lose that ground zero world leader position.
Bhavna?
Yeah, so in my fear, I'm going to name drop something. Everyone's mentioned ChatGPT. Google has a product. It's called Bard. I lead the team called Google Drive, and we're doing great things with Gen AI and large language models. And actually, to that effect, my greatest fear as someone who works on the development of these large language models is the ethical side of things. I really hope that Google and other companies keep in mind some of the ethical dilemmas and how things can go off the rails when we start substituting human judgment with bots, and they are only as biased as their training. So that is one of my things. Switching gears, my hope is that we not completely swing the pendulum with our hybrid work environment. We continue with what we have right now, which is allowing for remote people, but having people come in 2-3 times, because that is how we bring in people with diverse lived experiences and really diverse places that they live into the technology economy. So I hope we continue this.
Chris?
Thank you, and I think your point about the diversity of learners is really, really critical. Those untapped workers that we have are a very diverse workforce, and we have to have that support. So I would say that the fear for me is that we are seeing an economic divide that has continued progressively in the last 50 years. And we have to look at the skills gap and how we make sure that diverse learners from marginalized communities have opportunities to increase that skills gap and earn livable wages. So I think community colleges can play a huge role in that, and I think that we're poised to move a little bit more quickly than some of our larger research institutions, which clearly have a huge impact in our society. I think we have a workforce pivot that we can make very quickly. I think my hope is that as a first-generation college student that was born and raised in Boulder to a single mom who was able to buy a house in Boulder, while working at Potter's. How many of you know Potter's? Right. So I think Potter's, if it was still around, would probably be that with the sink. She was a cocktail waitress at Potter's, and she was able to buy housing in Boulder. So I think my hope is that we need to continue to look at how do we bring more into the workforce so that we have a robust, diverse community that really will drive the future of work in Colorado and in Boulder.
Great, thank you. Now I'll open it up to questions from the audience. We have an incredible wealth of knowledge and insight here that hopefully some of you are interested in taking advantage of. Dennis?
Thank you, Jessica. Great job. Great panel. My question is specifically for Becky. We have conversations down at the Downtown Boulder Partnership about what we're going to do with that office space downtown. And there's a conversation afoot that says convert a lot of those second floors into dwelling units. So is that a thing? What's the incentive for a landlord? Would a landlord get their arms around that? It sounds like a very pricey proposition, but is that a conversation in your circles?
It is a conversation, but it's easy for people to say, let's just make this residential. From a structural standpoint, you can address that up there from the construction world. It's not so easy. It's expensive. And by the time you go through the expense of that conversion, it's not very affordable to live there. And it's not true for all buildings, but the majority of that. So in theory, it's a great idea. I just don't see a lot of opportunity for that. There are some buildings that I think we will see that in as time goes and the capital markets remain tight and loans come due. I think there'll be some that will have to do something like that, but wait and see.
And thank you for mentioning that about constructability. I will say our experience too is that is the reality for all this conversation around conversion of office space to lab space or to more highly specialized space. That is not an inexpensive endeavor. And when considering that, there may be it may be cost prohibitive to potential future tenants, both on the residential side, but then I think both on the lab side. Okay, I'll go over here.
Hi. I'm Elizabeth McGuire, and I'm going to introduce myself because it makes sense of my question. I'm the executive director of the Colorado Music Festival and Center for Musical Arts. We're at Chautauqua Auditorium every summer, and I'm also on the Boulder County Arts Alliance board. So my perspective is that the arts organizations are like a key partner in providing that kind of life-work balance that maybe you are looking for to attract people to move here. It's an enormous arts community here. Probably per capita, more artists here than just about anywhere else in the country, so it's incredible. Of course, none of us can afford to live in Boulder. I'm a single mom. I have a house. I bought a house in Erie back in 2018, and now it's worth a lot more, I'm grateful to say. But that said, one of the things that's been puzzling to me since I've moved into this area is that there seem to be silos between the arts and businesses. And for example, we're about a $3.3 million budget. The piece of that budget that we carve out for corporate sponsorships is $20,000, and we struggle to reach that every year. And some of my colleagues are not experiencing that in the Western festivals we just met last week. And I'm wondering what we can do as an arts community to help you attract people, other than we are putting on world-class performances, of course, but what can we do as an arts community, and how can we partner with the business community a little bit better? I feel like we're working towards goals that we think are helpful, and maybe they're not actually helpful. So if you have any ideas, does anyone have any thoughts or ideas about how, as an arts community, we can integrate better?
I'll take a stab at it and probably show a lot of my colors as I respond to this. I was on the board of the Humane Society here in Boulder for 7 years. And one of the things that I was shocked by, we were in such a wealthy, involved community. Why is it so hard to raise funds from corporate sponsors here? And my current conclusion, y'all feel free to disagree with me, is that we have a lot of businesses that are structured in a way in Boulder that does not make giving to any nonprofit easy, right? Private equity backed companies typically are not eager to spend those dollars with nonprofits. My comment to you would be, go to the bootstrap companies. Like, we love to sponsor arts organizations and nonprofits and make a substantial corporate commitment to do that every year. And then the large non-PE companies, like I'll reference Google, also have been very active participants in our community and community giving. And so it's kind of weird because that middle ground between the big tech and the tiny bootstrap tech, that's the area I think it's hard to raise money from. But those ends, I know we'll support it. I know Google will as well.
Can I just add to that? Yes, with a caveat. So because it's a large, corporate environment, there's all these guardrails, if I would say, around giving. And for very selfish reasons, a lot of them have to do with how will this impact STEM and tech. So we give to nonprofits. We give to the YMCA because they do Girls Who Code programming, or we have given to Chautauqua because those were, and I'll come to that, is singular events. So if there is an event with a very clear, this is the benefit to the community, it's much easier to make a case to corporate headquarters. That's what I would say. Instead of here's a organization, can we just give them some money without a specific goal in mind?
Thank you.
And I'll just add to that too, as representing a family-owned private company in Longmont, so just down the street, but still in Boulder County. We do have, to Bhavna's point, a very narrow list of these are the things that we give money to. We give away a lot of money, a shocking amount of money to me. But the more that you can, as you're pursuing those dollars, find out what we have committed to in terms of our philanthropic giving and create that line between what you're doing in the arts and how that benefits. Like one of ours is, just generally kids in need. So certainly there is that line there, but sometimes we need you to kind of sell us that line, that direct line between what you're doing in the art space and our commitment to kids. All right, over here.
No, the only thing I was really going to add to it is the arts is super important, and we appreciate the art community and what you are providing as a part of a balance of what Boulder really is. I think there are a lot of companies here that the decision makers don't live here. And so then you really have to go to local, and from a local perspective, we, like everybody, there are lots and lots of needs within the community, and so you have to sort of pick and choose as something that you can relate to. And I know what we always try to give is where our employees are engaged, and as a part of your homework, and I'm sure you probably do that, finding those companies that have a real deep connection is because people here are super generous, I think, from a local level, and it starts with companies like Dennis down the way, that they are incredibly generous here. But I just think while you see a lot of the wealth in the companies, there's just unfortunately a lot of decisions don't get made right here. But we appreciate really what you do. You're super important.
Absolutely. All right, over here.
Hi, thanks. Dave Geltner, Returning Science. My question is, thanks for the discussion. My question is for Bhavna most of all. You mentioned that Google sees that remote work impacts innovation. This is what I've intuitively felt for some time, and I argue that, but people challenge me on, how do you measure that? What are the metrics? So I'm curious, how does Google measure that?
Yeah, we measure everything. So actually there's this double-edged sword. So we've measured, let me start with productivity. We've measured productivity. When we do surveys, our employees that work remote, or even the ones that work hybrid, so we say that you come in 2 to 3 times a week, depending on the team you're on, and then you get to work from home or anywhere. They'll say, oh, I'm so productive when I'm working from home because I don't have anyone interrupting me. Apologies, I'm not an English first language speaker, so sometimes I think in Hindi, so I look for words. So the interruptions. But actually what we saw was, while that may be true on the micro level, where some of the senior people get more done, and we can measure this because we can look at code submitted, design documents written, product requirement documents, and so on and so forth. While that may be true at the individual level, teams as a whole, we found, had less productivity. And our speculation there in looking at, we can also measure how long it takes to approve each other's code submissions. We have these data, and how much back and forth happens. So any code that's submitted, you need to have at least 2 to 3 other people approve it, and they can be back and forth. There's more back and forth, and we think it's because those relationships are fraying because people are working from home. So we see that. We've seen a downturn in that sort of team productivity. And in terms of innovation, we look at design documents and product review documents and how many have come up with new ideas and so on. And you can see there are teams, we have lots of teams that either have a high in-office rate, a high remote rate, and all that sort of thing. The teams that get together, regardless of where they are, we see more of these documents from them. We sadly, right now, don't have enough budget for remote teams to get together as often as we need for that to happen. So teams that come into the office have that. That's how we measure it.
Right. Years ago, a couple decades ago, I spoke to a CEO who said, I always put my companies in buildings with large hallways because it's those conversations when people meet each other, and ever since then, I remembered that. I think that's...
Yeah, it's a magical hallway. We call it the magical hallway conversation. We put our things like baristas and even our hair cutting salon is in a place where people, while they're waiting, can talk to each other, and we believe that ideas happen.
That's great, thank you. I'm gonna go over here and then come back to Matt.
Hi there, my name is Catherine, and I am the manager at Hawaii Fluid Art. I'm not coming to you guys from a tech perspective or really even a corporate perspective. It's kind of a small business thought. Everyone that works at my store is paycheck to paycheck. We're out here, we're doing the thing, we're trying what we can, we're trying to get the community engaged. So my question to you guys, thinking outside of the tech industry and focusing on a smaller business perspective, how do we encourage people to stay here? All of you had mentioned that we want people to stay here. What are we doing and how can we do that? We want people to be here. We want people to spend their money. We want people to build each other up. We want to create a system that is, economically feasible, and we want to make that accessible to everyone, to your baristas, to your hairstylists, to your local painting studio, to absolutely everyone that is here and is on a budget and is not here with a master's, bachelor's, associate's degree, any of that. I guess my second part of the question too, maybe is specifically at Becky. You had mentioned a 30% vacancy. Do you see that pattern continuing to grow?
Well, I'll answer that one first. Your first question is a good one, but no is the question. I think right now we are going to trend flat as it relates to the office vacancy. We're seeing companies that are starting to come back. They're just not coming back as a 20,000 square foot tenant. They're coming back as a 5,000 square foot tenant or a 7,000 square foot tenant. So I do see the trend flattening, and it will just take a while.
Go ahead.
Comment on the nature of hybrid work is directly impacting the foot traffic, right? So you see all these companies that are struggling to find the balance between, because you don't want to make it so hardcore that everyone's back in 5 days a week because you already have workforce gaps, right? So you're going to lose qualified people. But as we start to really work out this component of hybrid work, I mean, how many people in the room here work hybrid, right? So so on the days that you're hybrid, you're probably not going to the coffee shop or the art store or buying cards at the local gift shop. So I think the impact is hugely on the type and the where we work now. And so I think that as you see this trend coming more towards in-person work, you'll see that foot traffic. Not everybody's going to pack their lunch and bring their coffee, so that's more likelihood, I would believe.
I was going to say, does anybody want to take a stab at what are we doing to create an environment that ultimately creates an economy that works for all in Boulder? Because I think we can all agree that the Boulder economy in particular does not work for all in Boulder.
I'll take a stab at some of that, especially for small business. I think that people need two things to be here, to spend time in town, to spend money at small business. One is they need to feel safe, and I have to say, I do think that feeling of safety has changed in the last few years. I've lived in Boulder over 30 years, and Boulder today is very different from decades in the past in terms of feeling safe at night, feeling safe on the street. I think we have to address that to make people feel safe. And then it's a cost issue. Is it affordable to shop or dine or get coffee or whatever in Boulder? And some of that is politics. What are we asking small business in Boulder to do that sets their cost basis such that it's higher from surrounding communities, right? Would I go have coffee in Erie or Louisville versus the city of Boulder because it's cheaper out there? And I think we have to realize that there are real impacts of some of those policy decisions that have been made.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. Matt?
Yeah, Matt Wiggins with Boulder Economic Council. This one's for Chris. Chris, Front Range, we've talked a lot about transportation. We've talked about housing. We've talked about childcare. Front Range is in the sweet spot in between K-12 and in between four-year institutions. The state's throwing a lot of money towards workforce and trying to fix the problem of the talent pipeline. I'm curious, what kind of out-of-the-box thinking is either taking place right now, or what you personally would view as being really positive steps? And I left one component off that pipeline, industry. What are some out-of-the-box thinking that's taking place now, or probably should take place, in order to streamline that talent pipeline from, say, 6th grade all the way up until someone's stepping foot on the factory floor?
Yeah, I think, Matt, what you're referring to is what we call the big blur. And what we're really trying to do is really strengthen those connections between, learning about careers to learning within a career. And, as far as an apprenticeship model is a great example. So 3 years ago, Front Range Community College didn't have any apprenticeship programs. That wasn't what we did. We didn't train the trades. We didn't train electricians and plumbers. And what we found was that there's a lot of entry-level positions that have a high need for training. And so we took this opportunity to say, let's partner with businesses who will take on some of that on-the-job learning. And what we found is we more than doubled the completion rates of our students. And that's a big piece to think about, because if less than half the people that start in an educational pathway finish, that doesn't do you any good for those of you who are looking for those skilled workers. So when we looked at what supports those students in learning, thinking out of the box, promoting apprenticeships. We are now a part of our workforce and instructional team. So looking at other pathways, we're looking at business pathways, we're looking at engineering pathways to say, how can we give students the opportunity to learn while working, not only to enhance their completion rates, but to enhance their continuation and retention to get to those higher levels. And I think the other piece that needs a lot of attention is we've seen an increase in enrollment. We are back to pre-pandemic levels. And what we're seeing is a huge enrollment. 20% of our students at Front Range are concurrent enrollment students. These are high school students earning college credit while they're still in high school. That's going to continue to strengthen. It feeds our industry. It'll eventually feed your industry. That allows students to take on four-year degrees at a lower cost. And lastly, what we're seeing is that our students need a tremendous amount of support. Our students need transportation support, our students need childcare support, and our students are one flat tire away from decimating their higher education experience. And so we found that when we got federal grants to support childhood reimbursement for childhood care expenses and reimbursement for transportation to and from school and work, it really contributes to those that are finishing at our institution. So I think we know some support structures. I think earning while learning, I think having an opportunity to learn in hands-on environment and have supportive services really round out that ability to get those learners in the K-12 system into the workforce.
What support systems do industry need? Anybody? What support system or structures does industry need in place to kind of take that handoff or something like that?
I mean, isn't the answer is that we need businesses that are willing to partner with our educational institutions and take on apprentices?
Yeah, I was going to mention actually in tech, Google's a little behind the curve in this. We've just started this as of 2 years ago. But you know, other companies like IBM and so on have really thriving apprenticeship programs. And we're looking at those as success models. So Google has started in some locations, not here, those same apprenticeship programs. But there's other industry leaders there.
Thank you.
And just to give a little data, sorry, on that.
Go ahead.
0.2% of jobs in this nation are apprentices. That is so tiny. When you look at Canada and you look at the United Kingdom and you look at Sweden, those are double digits. And so we're so far behind in allowing workers to come in and have employers invest in their education. I mean, 70% of our students, the employers pay for their education. A 2-year degree at Front Range is about $10,000. These are costs that many businesses can't afford to support people in.
Great, thank you. We have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to take these last 2 questions over here before we wrap up.
Buford Barr with New Day Hydrogen. Matt stole some of my thunder there, so thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. You know, a lot of this we've been talking about, workforce development is such a huge component of all of this because all of us are struggling to find people to fill roles, especially as this economy is evolving so quickly. You know, Steve and Trent, you know, are talking about these areas that are evolving that really 5 years ago barely existed. New Day Hydrogen, we're doing the same thing. We're bringing, you know, technology. We're bringing an industry into here that 5 years ago no one even talked about. So, you know, the higher education systems aren't known for being nimble to reacting quickly to these situations. And, you know, how are we basically evolving those systems to get these people in these new technologies educated to the point that they can step into these roles, understanding that businesses, industry itself has to play a role in this, but how do we as the educational system start feeding that, you know, these new industries and start developing these markets that really could turn the page?
I think one of the ways the educational system can move more fluidly with industry partners is having strong industry input. And we outreach a lot for advisory boards. It's hard. It's kind of one other thing for industry to engage in. But, you know, we listen. You know, I work to develop 7 healthcare programs based on industry input. Here's the workers we need. Here's the skills we need. And we did that in 2 years or less. So we have the flexibility. We just don't always have, the resources from a fiscal perspective. For example, when we started a sterile processing program, it was $500,000 to build a lab. But we needed 90 hours in the lab. So we worked with the Vista Advent Hospital in Louisville to use their lab on Sundays. Why did we need to build a brand new something when something already existed? So I think industry partnerships are key to the future of our community colleges. We want to hear what you need because we'll build it.
I'm going to add just a little bit because I was going to give a shout out. University of Colorado, Boulder, my alma mater. I'm on their CSN Engineering Advisory Board, and they really take input and feedback from several of us that are in industry. And I see them bringing about course changes. I'm sure you've done that too, introducing new courses. I just was at a CS Advisory Board where they were asking, okay, with all this new AI work, what are we not teaching our students? And I think the more of folks that are seeing those skills gaps can reach out. We have the blessings of richness of universities around here. Reach out to these universities and give them feedback on this is what we need. I think that would be very helpful to them because they're listening.
Awesome, thank you.
And final audience question. Make
That'll
it a
be
good one.
My name is Anna, and I work with EcoCycle here in Boulder.
And I'm going to leave this question a little bit open-ended, but I'm very curious to know how each of you as a business have approached growth with climate and environmental issues in mind, and maybe how that impacts some things like requests to have people back in person, emissions that come from travel, that come from large business operations and things like that. So if anybody has any comments on how you and your business are approaching climate change and how that looks in a growth industry, love to hear it.
Thank you.
I can start with that one. So I'm a pretty small consulting group, so my individual impact is relatively small, but a lot of my clients are becoming more and more interested in that. And I'm thinking of one that's downtown Denver, actually incorporated into their performance metrics various measures associated with recycling, but also things like avoiding pallet consumption that then goes nowhere, getting green energy or renewable energy associated with the energy that they are using as they grow. So I think there's more and more consciousness of that. Incorporating those into metrics drive behavior, right? And so if you can put those metrics in at the top of the corporation and cascade them down, then it becomes important to people that it may be one of many a bajillion other things that I'm interested in. Now it becomes more and more interesting. So, yeah, I think absolutely the more you can put that in there, that gives you benefit actually to some of the other things we're talking about too, because I think the younger workforce is looking for that kind of consciousness in the companies that they're choosing to work for, and they want to see what their level of impact is in that corporation. And so the more I've seen that, the more that's kind of been interesting for me, because what does this individual have? What is their individual contribution to, renewable energy? Well, it's how you use the tools that you're given by management. So management has to make some calls on that. And then they get to see the response and the results of that as it gets better. So metrics drive behavior, from my perspective, helping my clients incorporate those metrics into their systems has been pretty helpful.
Okay, I wish I knew all the numbers off the top of my head, but Google understands that our scale means that every change we make has massive impact. And so we actually have a whole sustainability division. We have a chief sustainability officer. We publish an annual, I tried to look it up just now, but I'm not a fast enough reader, an annual sustainability report that folks should look at. Our data centers at this point are carbon neutral. We heat them with water that we recycle and so on. In Boulder, which I can speak to, yes, with us talking about bringing people in, we are very conscious of emissions, but actually there was a program that my predecessor, who's sitting right in front of you, Scott Green, I'm going to embarrass him, started that I have then since maintained, which is we give credits, we give money to people that don't drive in single occupancy vehicles. We give money if you use a non-mechanized form of transport. I bike in. For every day that I bike in, I get $5. It's great. We have carpool. We provide the vans, and people line up. So we're trying to do that. And then, of course, eco passes and so on. We also, I was talking to someone about sustainability. We have a massive meal program because we provide breakfast and lunch.
We've worked with you in some capacity, I believe, in your cafe.
That's right. So we have those centrifuges that do amazing things. They take all the food off our plates and then compost it and then give it in. So, and then the most recent thing is we have these micro kitchens, and we've gone to eliminating single-use plastic. Actually, we've done it and not gone to. That sounds wishy-washy. We have eliminated single-use plastic from our micro kitchens with water dispensers and actual bottles and so on and so forth. So I'm actually really proud of how conscious a company like Google is about their footprint and what they're trying to do. And it's not just check mark, like virtue signaling kind of thing. It's people are genuinely passionate about finding ways to be sustainable.
I think you are setting the standard in a lot of ways for other large businesses, particularly in tech.
And I think you can use your $5 a day to go to the art store or get a coffee.
Yes.
I agree with Steve that the younger workforce is particularly inspired and motivated by eco-sustainability. I'll just highlight two things we do at Real 4, much smaller than Google, is we've been a B Corp for the last 5 years. And of course that B Corp measures a bunch of different aspects of the business and sustainability, but eco-sustainability is a big piece of that. And it's actually driven our behaviors, right? Like we track how many garbage bags we use every week to measure what's our waste stream look like. We track obviously all of our energy use, any flights or travel, all of that is tracked so that we can measure and reduce it. The other thing that we have done in partnership with another Boulder company, EcoSol, is we offset 100% of our carbon use, not just for the company, but for all of our employees as individuals. And that has been, when we first started to go down that path, I was like, will people care, right? Will individual employees be like, yeah, you're offsetting my carbon use, whatever. Actually, we've gotten really positive feedback. People actually care that we go that extra step to offset all of that usage.
One thing I'll add up for Front Range Community College, we're really looking at our scheduling format. We're a non-resident institution. And so we're really trying to build a schedule that students can minimize the number of trips they take to campus. And I don't necessarily think the intent was from a green perspective, but because it really helps them have a better work-life balance. But we found with our apprenticeships that we had much better student enrollment when they could come just one day a week.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for that question. We are out of time. I want to say thank you. I think unfortunately out of time. I'd love to have this conversation all day with all of you. But thank you all for taking the time to join us this morning. Really appreciate your insights, and everybody help me give them a round of applause before we all leave the stage. With that, I think I'm turning it back over to Scott.
Sure, you can stay, or I know some of you have to leave. So, well, I just want to, in the spirit of closing here, just shout out to Jessica. We got an hour and a half out of your voice today, which is absolutely fantastic. But more so, we got a tremendous amount of your experience that came through. So thank you so much to Jessica and to the panelists. So wow. As we come to a close, I hope the conversations have met your expectations. We tried to sort of work the earth, as we say, talking to a 100-year-old restaurant and bar owner here in Boulder, all the way up to Nobel Prize laureate, and then to the tremendous conversation we've had here today. It's a real testament to what Boulder is about. I mean, it's diverse, it's deep, it's geeky, scientific, but I would say all of us are dedicated to the quality of life and the products that we produce out of here. So that's what we wanted to achieve with a little bit of a knowledge of how we're actually moving into the future. So I just want to say first, thank you to all of the participants, the speakers, the panelists, and all the folks that asked the questions today. So let's give all of them a round of applause collectively. I'd just like to continue and once again thank our sponsors here. So if we could maybe go to the next slide, or the next two slides. There we go. And are critical to this event and have been over the years. So I would like to first of all thank CU Boulder as well as Elevations Credit Union for their continued support in this program, but more so their continued support in the community. So thank you very much. And I'm going to hold on this slide for a second. There's a gentleman who joined us earlier this morning that I think is worth recognizing in the context of CU Boulder. Chancellor DeStefano is there in the back. Yeah, go ahead. As I go into my new role, which will be at CU, I'm going to be talking a little bit more physics, and I want to, in the spirit of what Tom Cech said, momentum is a vector, and momentum has mass, it has velocity, but it also has direction. And Chancellor, in your period here and your leadership at CU, I think you've given the university all of those things. And the momentum that we have into our evolving community that you've provided at CU has been exemplary. So thank you so much for all of that as you move into your next phase of your career. So thank you. Our economic vitality sponsor, the WW Reynolds Group, thank you so much for your support. And going on the community support, I think we've seen and heard from many of the folks here from the city of Boulder, so thank you all for your continuing support. And thank you for being here, because a lot of the issues that were brought up are clearly issues that you're facing at the city. So thank you for listening, and thank you for participating today. I'd also like to thank our supporting sponsors, as well as our media sponsors here. So I know that there's a media table over here that they're all called. So thank you all so much for being here today, and certainly for providing John for the interviewing for the sync session earlier this morning. And lastly, thank you for the contributing sponsors. Again, in collective, we can't do this without all of the support and all of the input from the sponsors. So thank you all collectively, and let's give all of them a round of applause. Before I turn it over to John Taylor, I also want to give a heartfelt thanks to a group of individuals that make this happen. It's a collective. It includes the Boulder Chamber staff members. It includes this core of ambassadors that we have that work with the Chamber, and it also includes a core of volunteers that are interested in the work that we do and volunteer their time to support events like this throughout the year. So just collectively, thank you all for making today happen. We really appreciate your support, and in some cases your pro bono support for the organization that is the Boulder Chamber and the Boulder Economic Council. So thank you so much. I used to say I'm going to now turn it over to a man who needs no introduction, but I think that is very relevant. The Boulder Chamber is engaged in virtually every aspect of Boulder, and I would say John Taylor, the president and CEO of the Boulder Chamber, is that connecting thread to all of us. And so with that, to give us some closing remarks, I'd like to invite John Taylor up to the podium.
Okay, as you all get ready to get back to your email, just a couple more things. So I was asked at the outset of this gathering, just why am I wearing this button that says why? You'll notice it's why, not with a question mark, but with an exclamation point. There's a lot of reasons why we are using the term why in talking about the work of the Boulder Chamber. But the first thing is just about the character of an event that we just had here today. We had the opportunity to hear from an organization or business that defines the character of our community, and there's so many other institutions that I think you can think of in your mind that define for you what makes this place special. We also had the opportunity to hear from an esteemed leader of our innovation and research institutions, somebody who is driving much of the creativity that supplies the work for our businesses. And then we had a great panel discussion from many of our industry leaders, people who are driving industries that are the baseline of our economy, the foundation of support, the ones that ultimately many of our small businesses thrive from through their support and services. Critical to hear from them. All of that is the makeup of the Boulder economy. So the why that I have is the opportunity that we have as the Boulder Chamber and through the investment of our Boulder Economic Council investors to inform all of you business leaders about where our economy is going so you understand it so you can plan ahead for yourself. Second, we want to support you in addressing those issues that were outlined here. There's so many opportunities that we see through the innovation, through the character, through the great character of our community that draws so many people here. But we also know there are challenges. We heard about housing. We heard about homelessness. We heard about permit review processes. All of those things are issues that we need to address as a community, and the Boulder Chamber and the BEC are here because we want to address those issues so we lift our businesses and support our economy. But fundamentally, the why with a big exclamation point, it's about all of you. It's about why we are all here. We love this community. We love what this community gives to us in terms of jobs and opportunity, hopefully, and we want to make sure we do this, lift everybody with the economic opportunity that we have here. But it's about the community that we get to build together, the community that we love for the outdoors, we love for the opportunity that it is to provide us with a thriving economy. So I look around the room and I say, the big why for me is all of you who come together with that same vision, with that same understanding and appreciation of our community. And I thank you so much for being a part of our vision, our goal, and our mission at the Boulder Chamber and the BEC to continue the work to make sure that we are a strong, thriving economy and a community. So thank you all for being here today. Onward. Oh. You know how, like, when you think you have two things to say and you've only said one of them? One more moment. So I was going to say the other why I have is that I get to work with very special people. I mentioned, or has been mentioned, we have a great board, leadership board, Kate Brown, our chair right here, Dennis Paul, our chair-elect, and then many others in the audience. Amazing, amazing staff team. But I do have, because of the quality of our staff team, periodically some of the larger institutions, to be unnamed in our community, will grab that quality and take it to their own. And it's becoming quite a headache for me. But I just want to acknowledge that I have had the opportunity for 3 years to work with somebody who's become a great friend and partner, somebody who all of you have had the chance to hear from today, but through his 3 years of work during the COVID period, through our transition back into normal society, and is someone who does understand at a deep level the character of our economy and shares that great heart and concern for our community at large, and that's Scott Sternberg. So he is going to be moving on to a role that I think defines his best qualities in terms of that mix of science, understanding, and business community coming together. But it has been a great pleasure and honor to work with him, and I thank him so much for the elevation that he's given us through his work at the BEC and the Boulder Chamber. So Scott, onward, enjoy your next career chapter, but thank you so much for your support and work at the Boulder Chamber. And I think that covers my list, so you are now dismissed. Thank you.